When I came across that video of the hospital lockdown, I was working overtime at the office. Central Hospital in City S was under an emergency lockdown for unknown reasons. In the video, personnel in hazmat suits were putting up police tape at the hospital entrance. The ambulance lights looked exceptionally piercing in the night. The person filming had a thick regional accent, yelling, "Oh my god, why did they suddenly block off the hospital? I just brought my aunt here for an emergency." I instinctively frowned. Checking the post time 20 minutes ago. Anxious and suspicious, I tapped into the comment section, only to find that comments had been disabled. Something wasn't right. Putting down my phone, I went back to typing code. It was the final push before the holidays, and the whole development team was there, rushing to finish a payment system project. In 3 days, I would have my year-end bonus, grab my suitcase, and board the high-speed train back home. My parents had already been bragging in the family group chat for a week, saying their amazing son was coming back. "Leo, did you see what happened at Central Hospital?" Kevin, sitting across from me, suddenly asked. His eyes were still glued to his screen. "Just saw it. Probably another outbreak of some new strain of rabies. My cousin is a nurse there. She just sent a voice note home, crying hysterically." The background noise was full of screaming. That caught my attention. I stopped what I was doing and looked out. "What happened?" She said a few crazy people were brought into the biting anyone they saw. Even security couldn't hold them down. Kevin finally looked away from his screen, usually sharp and efficient. There was a rare look of terror in his eyes. "She told us to go home immediately, lock all the doors and windows, and absolutely do not go outside. She said there was blood everywhere in the hospital, and the police had already locked down the building." It sent a shiver down my spine. No way. Like in the movies. I also thought he was overreacting, but she works in the ICU. She wouldn't make a joke like this. Kevin shook his head. "Anyway, my mom already went to the grocery store. I pretended to go back to work, but my mind was already racing. A programmer's mindset made me instinctively search for patterns and anomalies. I pulled out my phone to check major news platforms. No reports at all. The trending topics list seemed frozen. The top results were all trivial entertainment gossip, but the refresh frequency indicated an abnormal spike in traffic. Only a few chaotic, real-time traffic updates popped up. Heavy congestion around Central Hospital again. Signal anomaly. Communications may be disrupted. Immediately after, the web page suddenly turned into scrambled code, followed by a string of server connection timeouts. This wasn't normal network congestion. It felt more like physical damage. As a programmer, I could tell this wasn't a firewall block, but a sudden interruption of data from the source. It was as if someone had physically severed all the fiber optic cables in the hospital area, or the server room had taken a direct hit. I switched to a private chat group. In our tech exchange group for developers, people were already discussing it. "Guys, something's wrong. Anything I search about the hospital is completely blocked. That hospital video from earlier can't be shared anymore." I quickly typed out. "A medical worker I know says things are bad. Patients are showing extreme madness and bloodlust. The authorities might lock down key areas under military quarantine." After sending the message, I thought for a moment and added, "I'm going to stock up on supplies. Any suggestions?" The group chat instantly blew up. "Is your source reliable? Man, holy shit. Are zombies actually happening? Cut the crap. It's definitely just some psychiatric patients escaping." As I was scrolling through the replies, my phone vibrated. The train booking app flashed a striking red alert. "Line failure. Attention, valued passengers. Due to a severe power system failure at the city's transportation hub, the railway signaling and dispatch center is temporarily offline. All trains entering or leaving City S are delayed indefinitely or cancelled. Your train, number 1357, cannot depart as scheduled." I stared at my phone screen, feeling my blood run cold. As a major transit hub, City S had multiple redundancies for backup power and dispatch systems. Short of a catastrophic physical blow, they would absolutely never cut off all external transit without warning. Almost at that exact moment, on the big screen in the office, the team's project management software suddenly flashed a company-wide urgent evacuation notice, building management, and police report. Multiple violent assaults in the CBD area. Due to extreme safety risks, the company has decided to evacuate everyone immediately. All employees, please drop what you are doing. Do not take the elevators, and exit the building quickly via the fire stairs. The office erupted into chaos. What's going on? Are we working from home again? My internet at home sucks. Is this project going to be abandoned or what? Just got a text from my wife. The grocery store is packed. I quietly closed my laptop, quickly stuffing my essentials into my backpack. A programmer's intuition told me that when a system shows multiple abnormal metrics, it usually means a catastrophic crash is imminent. Kevin stood up across from me. He glanced at me and said, "My cousin just texted. She's been ordered to stay at the hospital and can't come home. She says things inside are out of control, and everyone must be quarantined on site to stop the unknown attacks from spreading outside." We looked at each other, panic visible in both of our eyes. How long has it been? How long has what been? How long since the first attack happened? According to my cousin, the first crazy person who bit someone showed up last night. By this morning, the was completely out of control. There are at least 5 or 6 lunatics biting people on site. It's spreading fast. Which neighborhood do you live in? Waterfront Estates, East District. Don't you live in the West District? I nodded. In a bit. I'm going to the grocery store. Need me to grab you anything? No need. My mother-in-law is already out getting supplies. He hesitated for a second. Leo, do you really think it's going to be that bad? I'm not sure. I answered honestly. But I'd rather be overprepared than underprepared. Leaving the office building, the world outside looked no different than usual. Winter in City S wasn't as freezing as in the north, but it was cold enough to see your breath. The street seemed a bit more crowded than usual, but there was no obvious panic. Most people still had no idea what was happening. However, as I approached the local supermarket near my neighborhood, the anomalies began to show. Long lines had already formed at the entrance, and people's shopping carts were piled sky high. I saw someone wheeling out entire crates of bottled water and instant noodles. I stood at the entrance, calculating the time. If I lined up now, it would take at least an hour just to get inside. I decided to head home first to check my pantry before finalizing a shopping list. After all, that's just how a programmer's mind works. Assess the requirements first, then execute. Walking into the Waterfront Estates complex, for the first time, I carefully tuck in this place where I had lived for 3 years. Over 30 high-rise residential buildings, about 2,000 households. There was a daycare, a fitness area, and a small commercial strip. It was a gated community, but security had always been a joke. Key cards had long been duplicated everywhere, and the guards just sat symbolically in their booths. If this crisis spirals out of control, what will become of this place? Entering my apartment building, I ran into Mrs. Chan from downstairs in the elevator. She was carrying a few bags of vegetables, and she clearly looked relieved when she saw me. Leo, dear, could you press the 14th floor for me? My hands are completely full. I pressed the button for her, noticing that besides several large packs of noodles, her shopping bags also contained quite a few bags of high-calorie brown sugar. Mrs. Chan, did you hear some news too? I asked, testing the waters. The elderly woman looked sharp. She eyed me knowingly. So you know too? My son just called and said, we might be quarantined. So he told me to buy more food. She lowered her voice. Young Kevin in apartment 903. He works right at Central Hospital. Today, his workplace won't let him come home. They said the medical staff is being put up in coordinated housing. This piece of information matched what Kevin's cousin had said, making the unease in my heart grow even stronger. Do you usually keep some food stocked up? Hearing my question, Mrs. Chan smiled. I've been through a lot in my life. The little storage room in my basement is packed completely full. Plus, I grow plenty of vegetables on my balcony. It's enough to last me a while. The elevator reached the 14th floor. I helped Mrs. Chan carry her things to her door. Leo, you're all by yourself here in City S. If you ever need help with anything, just come find me. She patted my hand. Stock up on more food. People are already starting to panic buy at the supermarket. Returning to my 17th floor studio apartment, I immediately opened the fridge and cabinets to take inventory. The situation was not promising. In the fridge, there was only half a bag of frozen dumplings, 2 apples, and a few bottles of beer. In the cabinets, there was half a bag of rice, 2 packs of instant noodles, and some seasonings. As a programmer who survived entirely on takeout year-round, my household supply level was practically zero. I pulled out my laptop and started making a list. If I had to isolate at home for 2 weeks, I would need at least 20 liters of drinking water, dry goods, rice, noodles, instant food, canned goods and long shelf life items, essential medicine, fever reducers, -1 inflammatories, band-aids, daily necessities, toilet paper, survival gear and protective equipment, respirators, rubbing alcohol, and disinfectant, backup energy, power banks, batteries, and flashlights. Once the list was finished, I opened the window and looked outside. There were visibly more people in the neighborhood than usual. Quite a few were hurriedly leaving with suitcases, likely rushing back to their hometowns. Others were carrying large bags of groceries from the supermarket. Just then, my phone suddenly rang. It was a video call from my mom. After I picked up, her anxious face immediately appeared on the screen. Son, what is going on over there? Your dad's classmate works in the City S government, and he says things look pretty bad. Yeah, it seems to be some kind of rabies variant, though some say it's mental hysteria caused by contaminated water. I tried my best to keep my tone calm. It's a bit chaotic outside right now. The company told us to stay indoors for now, until public order is restored. I just got a notification that my train ticket was cancelled. I hesitated for a moment. Mom, it should be fine. It's probably just a temporary lockdown, like they're catching a fugitive or something. On the other end of the line, my mom uncharacteristically didn't press the issue about me coming home. Instead, she said, then just don't come back. Stay put inside your place. Your dad's classmate said this time might not be simple. Military armored vehicles are driving into the city. It doesn't look like an arrest, it looks like a war. Have you guys stocked up on food too? It seemed the information reaching my hometown might be even more accurate than what we had here. I'm just about to go, I said, mentioning that I didn't have much at home. Oh, for goodness sake, I've told you 100 times to keep food stocked up. My mom scolded me for a bit, and then said nervously, son, if you feel like something's wrong, Find a safe place immediately. If worst comes to worst, drive back home. The roads are too chaotic right now. There are checkpoints everywhere and crazy people biting others. Running around aimlessly at a time like this would be a death sentence. I gave a bitter smile. Don't worry. I'll take good care of myself. Over the next few days, I'll call you guys often to let you know I'm okay. After hanging up, I sat on the sofa and stared blankly for a while. Outside the window, the sky was growing dark. The neighborhood streetlights turned on one by one. In the distance, an ambulance siren wailed, getting closer before fading away again. My phone vibrated. It was an urgent traffic alert from the city's traffic radio. Traffic alert. Due to multiple multi-vehicle accidents and sudden public security incidents, temporary closures have been implemented at major highway exits. Leaving the city, outbound lanes are currently heavily congested. Since clear times are unknown, drivers are strongly advised not to head toward these areas. Please lock your car doors and windows, and take precautions to avoid danger. I took a screenshot and posted it to the developer group chat. Guys, traffic is being controlled. Looks like this is real. The group immediately went wild. Someone shared a live video from near the hospital. SWAT team members had set up double-layered barricades, and several men in heavy riot gear were working together to escort a violently struggling patient into a quarantine corridor. I watched the video with a deep frown. I'd seen clips online before of hospital altercations or psychiatric patients having episodes, but this patient's behavior was completely different. That savage, joint contorting, almost beast-like way of tearing and thrashing reminded me of scenes from horror movies. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from our company's CTO. Starting tomorrow, we work from home. The project will move forward as scheduled. Leo, you live in Waterfront Estates, right? My brother-in-law is the property manager there. If anything happens, you can contact him. Here's his number. I thanked him and saved the number in my phone, knowing how incredibly useful this connection might be in the days to come. It was late at night. I decided to seize the moment while the supermarket crowds thinned out to hurry up and buy some supplies. Before heading out, I deliberately put on a respirator and grabbed alcohol spray and a few shopping bags. In the elevator, I met a young couple. The woman looked about 7 or 8 months pregnant. Are you heading to the grocery store too? The husband initiated the conversation. We just got back from there. Don't bother. The shelves are practically stripped bare. Seriously? That fast? I was a bit shocked. We managed to grab the last 2 cases of bottled water. He pointed to several large bags near the door. Instant noodles. Regular noodles. Rice all gone. The frozen food aisle was a total war zone. Then what's left to buy? Snacks. Nobody's fighting over those shelves. The pregnant wife chimed in. There are still some fruits and vegetables left, but the fresh ones have all been picked clean. Oh, by the way, the pharmacy is completely packed too. Even band-aids are out of stock. The elevator reached the first floor. The husband reached out to shake my hand. I'm Ron from 1602, and this is my wife, Chloe. I'm Leo from 173. I shook his hand. With your wife's condition, do you guys need to hoard any essentials? Let me know if I can help with anything. Thanks, but we're pretty well prepared. Ryan gave a tired smile. Chloe's due date is in March. Hopefully, everything will be back to normal by then. I didn't tell him that. Based on the information I had seen, the situation this time might be far more complicated than he imagined. Leaving the apartment complex, the streets were noticeably more crowded than during the day. Everyone seemed to be in a frantic rush. Quite a few people were dragging suitcases, likely trying to leave before traffic controls were fully enforced. In City S, long lines formed outside convenience stores, with everyone clutching overflowing shopping bags. The supermarket was indeed picked clean, just as Ryan had described. I walked around the aisles and found some overlooked items, a few bags of beans, mung beans, red beans, and soybeans, some canned peaches, mixed congee, a few packs of biscuits, and a large bag of potatoes. In the frozen section, I managed to snag a few boxes of frozen steak. I found the last few boxes of hot pot, meatballs, and some frozen dumplings. When checking out, the cashier was visibly exhausted. She mechanically scanned the items and told me, "Everyone's gone crazy today. It hasn't stopped since this afternoon. Is the situation really that serious?" She looked up and glanced at me. My sister works in the hospital cafeteria. She said the medical staff aren't allowed to go home anymore. The hospital morgue is already packed full, and I heard the building has been sealed shut, with nothing but screaming inside. The military is deploying outside. Figure it out yourself. Leaving the supermarket, the moon was already high in the sky. The crowds on the street began to thin out, but sirens could still be heard from a distance. I quickened my pace, then suddenly noticed the pharmacy across from the complex was still lit up. Thinking it was worth a shot, I walked inside. The pharmacy was completely empty, with only an elderly pharmacist sitting behind the counter. "Is there anything you need?" he asked gently. "Do you have any fever reducers or anti-inflammatories left?" I asked. "Fever reducers are sold out. There are still some anti-inflammatories left." He stood up and took a few boxes from the shelf. "What else do you need?" "We're completely out of masks and rubbing alcohol." I thought about it. "Do you have any band-aids and bandages? And some vitamins and antiseptics?" "Please." He smiled slightly. "You're very calm, young man. Most people only buy fever reducers and masks, forgetting other things they might need." As he was packing up the medicine for me, a sudden commotion came from outside the store. An ambulance sped past, immediately followed by the blare of police sirens. "It's starting." The old pharmacist sighed. "Hopefully they can bring it under control this time." You seem to know something. I couldn't help but ask as I took the medicine. He looked at me. His voice low. I've been in this business for 40 years. I've seen it all. But this time, I heard from colleagues that medical staff at Central Hospital have already been infected. The symptoms are very peculiar. After running a fever, they become extremely violent and highly aggressive. Like I hesitated for a moment. Zombies. The old pharmacist's expression turned grave. I don't know what it is, but I know that by this time tomorrow, I probably won't be here. He pointed under the counter, and I saw a packed duffel bag. I plan to head to my old place in the suburbs. Right after closing tonight, there's a vegetable garden there, far away from the crowds. Returning to the apartment complex, security had clearly been tightened. There were 2 extra guards at the gate, and they were checking the key cards of everyone entering and leaving. I scanned my card to enter, and heard a voice coming from one of the guards' walkie-talkies. Notify all staff on duty. Starting tomorrow, a full lockdown will be implemented. All outsiders are prohibited from entering. In the elevator, I ran into Kevin, whom I had seen this afternoon. He looked utterly exhausted, clutching a few bags of instant food in his arms. Are you doing okay? I asked. He shook his head. My cousin, she just messaged me. She said some of her colleagues at the hospital have already been isolated. They were bitten by patients while working and started showing symptoms a few hours later. His voice trembled. The government is deploying the military. Leo, this is no ordinary flu or riot. The elevator reached the 17th floor. I hesitated for a moment. Want to come over to my place for a bit? We can exchange information. Kevin gave a weary smile. No, thanks. I need to get home quickly and take care of my mom. She's terrified, constantly muttering that the apocalypse is here. He paused. But we could start a group chat, just for our building. We can keep each other updated if anything happens. Good idea. I nodded. I'll set it up. Give me your contact info. Back inside my apartment, I put down the supplies I had bought and took a deep breath. The city lights outside the window were still bright, looking no different from any other night. But I knew a storm was brewing. I pulled out my phone and created a WeChat group called Building 17, Mutual Aid Group. Then I added Kevin and the property managers' contact info that my CTO had given me. As the first message in the group, I wrote, "Hello everyone, I'm Leo from 1703. Given the current situation, I suggest we pool our information and resources to get through this crisis together. If you have any news or need help, please share it in the group." After sending that, I sent another message. According to reliable sources, the situation this time might be more serious than we think. I recommend everyone stock up on at least 2 weeks of supplies. If you face any difficulties, please ask for help here. Putting down my phone, I walked over to the window, in the direction of the distant hospital. The red glow of emergency lights was exceptionally striking in the dark. A drizzle had started falling into the night sky of City S at some point. Raindrops tapped gently against the window pane. My phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from an old high school classmate back home. "Leo, get back here right now. I just heard City S is about to be locked down." I replied. "Too late. Traffic controls are already in place." He sent over another video. It was footage from inside the hospital circulating online. A patient was being held down on a hospital bed by 5 or 6 medical workers, yet they were still thrashing like a wild beast, letting out roars that didn't sound human. I stared at the video, watching it over and over, until my phone screen went dark from timing out. At this moment, I was finally certain that the world we knew was coming to an end, and I, just an ordinary programmer, would face unprecedented challenges. In this unfamiliar new world, over a dozen neighbors had already joined the group chat, with people constantly posting panicked messages and inquiries. I took a deep breath and started replying to their questions, providing as much information as I knew. It looked like from now on, my role wouldn't just be that of a bystander. At dawn, I was woken up by my phone vibrating frantically. The Building 17 Mutual Aid Group had grown to 57 members overnight, almost half of the building's residents. Message notifications kept pouring in. I scrolled up to read them one by one. Someone was asking for the latest updates on the hospital. Someone was asking where they could still buy food. But mostly, it was panic and speculation. I heard some kind of potent new virus leaked. My friend is a medical worker. They said over a dozen colleagues have already been isolated. Does anyone know if we can leave City S right now? My daughter is still out of town. I rubbed my eyes and looked out the window. The sky was overcast, but there were already quite a few people moving around the complex. Several private cars were parked by the main gate, as if preparing to leave. Long lines had formed outside the security booth, likely residents asking about travel restrictions. The phone vibrated again. This time, it was an official text alert. Notice from the city's Public Security Warning Center. In light of large-scale violent riots in the urban area, which are showing a strong tendency to spread, the entire city is entering a level 1 state of alert effective immediately. Police have locked down key sectors. For your own safety, citizens are urged to return home immediately. Reinforce doors and windows. Absolutely do not open doors for strangers. And stay far away from anyone exhibiting abnormal behavior. Just as I thought, a citywide martial law. I couldn't help but gasp. This level of control and restriction was something I had usually only heard of in wartime. Or nuclear leak drills. No buffer period. No explanation of the cause. Everything was happening too fast and too desperately, giving off an undeniable sense that things were spinning out of control. Just as I was about to forward this message to the group, The property manager, Jerry, spoke up first. Hello, residents. I am Jerry, the property manager for Waterfront Estates. The situation is highly critical. To ensure everyone's safety, management has initiated an emergency defense protocol. We are currently using barricades to seal shut the east, west, and south entrances. Only the north gate will remain open as an emergency checkpoint. And security personnel have been deployed there to stand guard. All residents, please go home immediately. Lock your doors and windows. And absolutely do not loiter in common areas. If any suspicious person attempts to force their way in, we will take direct enforcement measures. Right after that, Kevin sent a message. My cousin just got in touch with me. The situation is worse than we thought. The hospital has completely locked down the inpatient building and established a maximum level biohazard zone. The military has entered the hospital and cut off all external communications. The group chat erupted. I noticed a new user who had just joined. Ryan-16-0-2. The expectant father I met in the elevator last night. Neighbors, things might be more severe than what the officials are saying. He wrote, I work at the city police department. We received an internal notice yesterday that some officers were infected while responding to violent assaults. The symptoms are a high fever, extreme rage, and highly aggressive behavior. Most importantly, they actively try to bite people. The moment this message came out, the group chat instantly blew up. I quickly reply, if that's really the case, we need to be prepared. I suggest everyone stay indoors and minimize contact. If you absolutely must go out, wear a respirator, wear long sleeves, and stay away from anyone acting strangely. Jerry followed up immediately with a message from management. Management is organizing containment and prevention measures. We will sanitize the common areas today. If any resident sees anything unusual, please report it immediately. I put down my phone and looked out the window. Not far away, the sound of ambulance sirens wailed, much more frequently than usual. From my vantage point, I could see the north gate of the complex. The guards had already started checking everyone entering and leaving. A few residents were arguing with them, looking highly agitated. Knock, knock, knock. A frantic knocking at the door interrupted my thoughts. Looking through the peephole, I saw Kevin's anxious face. The moment I opened the door, he practically lunged inside, clutching his phone tightly, his face pale as a ghost. Something happened. Leo, his voice was trembling. My cousin, she was just attacked while we were on a video call. My heart sank. What do you mean? We were video chatting. She was working the night shift at the hospital when suddenly a patient rushed up from behind her. Kevin's voice choked up. That patient bit her on the shoulder, and then the screen went black. When I tried calling back, her phone was turned off. I had him sit down and poured him a glass of water. Is there any other way to contact the hospital to confirm what happened? He shook his head. I tried calling Leo, but no one's picking up. I'm wondering if I should call the police. Don't rush into it yet, I said, thinking for a moment. Calling the police might not do anything. Their entire force has probably already been deployed. Which part of the hospital does your cousin work in? The ICU, right next to the infectious disease department. Kevin held a glass with both hands, his knuckles turning white. Leo, I'm terrified. The symptoms of those patients he described are completely wrong. The fever won't go down. They're totally delirious. And they're extremely violent, attacking anyone who comes near them. The most terrifying part is that people who get bitten soon show the exact same symptoms. My mind was racing. If this virus spreads through bites, and the incubation period is that short, the transmission chain will cause exponential growth. I unconsciously used a programmer's term. If it's not properly contained, the growth curve will skyrocket in a very short amount of time. Kevin looked at me. Are you saying it'll spiral out of control? I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I asked, did your cousin mention an incubation period? How long from being bitten to showing symptoms? She said it's very fast. 2 to 3 hours. That's why things at the hospital are such a mess. They don't even have time to isolate people. An incubation period of 2 to 3 hours. That leaves almost zero buffer time for prevention. I suddenly had a sinister premonition. When was your cousin bitten? Kevin looked at his phone. About 2 hours ago. We looked at each other, both realizing the gravity of the situation at the same time. I immediately grabbed my phone and sent a message to the aid group. Urgent alert. This is not an infectious disease. It's some kind of biological mutation. It spreads primarily through contact with blood and bodily fluids, especially bites. The turning speed is incredibly fast. Within 2 to 3 hours. Everyone, lock your doors immediately and prepare weapons for self-defense. If you notice anyone around you showing bloodshot pupils, a loss of reason, or a tendency to bite, please stay away immediately and lock them in an enclosed space. Do not hesitate. That is no longer your family member. The moment I sent this message, the group chat erupted. A barrage of doubts, panic, and demands for proof flooded in like an avalanche. Having no time to reply to each one, I added another message. This is an emergency. This is not a rumor. I have a reliable source. If my worst fears are confirmed, large-scale infections might break out around the hospital today. Please be prepared. And be exceptionally vigilant if you are near the hospital area. The property manager, Jerry, quickly responded to my message regarding what Leo said. We have also received a similar briefing. Management is tightening the complex's defenses, and all entry points will be strictly controlled. Residents, please understand and cooperate. With the property manager backing it up, the voices of doubt in the group thinned out a bit, replaced by even more panic and pleas for help. My kid has a fever. Is he infected? Does anyone know if any pharmacy is still open? Should we organize people to stand guard downstairs to stop infected people from getting in? Facing all these questions, I didn't know how to answer for a moment. Just then, Kevin stood up. I have to get home. My mom is still waiting for me. Wait, I stopped him. Since your cousin is a medical worker, did she mention any preventive or countermeasures? Kevin thought for a moment. She said the infection spreads through bodily fluids, mostly saliva and blood, so being bitten is the most dangerous. Also, the infected seem to be extremely sensitive to sound. They get attracted by loud noises. This information was absolutely critical for us. I nodded. Thanks for telling me this. If anything new comes up, please let me know right away. After seeing Kevin out, I immediately shared this key information in the group, advising everyone to keep noise to a minimum, to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Less than 10 minutes later, the community PA system suddenly blared. Urgent notice to all residents, please return to your homes immediately, and lock your doors and windows. A security incident has occurred near the North Gate. Management and police are currently handling it. Repeating, all residents please return to your homes immediately. I bolted upright and rushed to the window. From my vantage point, I could see absolute chaos at the North Gate. Several police cars and ambulances were parked there, sirens wailing in a chaotic chorus. A crowd of people was scattering in panic, while right next to the security booth, a few men in uniforms were wrestling with something. Even from this distance, I could feel the unusual atmosphere. That was no ordinary riot or altercation. It was a much more primal, much bloodier scene. My phone vibrated again. It was a message from Ryan. Something happened at the North Gate. Someone who escaped from the hospital rushed into the complex and bit two of the guards. The police have already arrived, but things are chaotic. My heart rate accelerated, and my palms began to sweat. Events are unfolding at a terrifying speed, perfectly aligning with my previous predictions. If the hospital spirals out of control, the infection chain will spread exponentially. Outside the window, the emergency siren suddenly stopped. In their place came a sharp gunshot, followed by a second one, then a third. I couldn't help but take a half step back. In China, it's extremely rare for the police to discharge their firearms. The situation must be even more severe than we imagined. My phone vibrated again. It was an urgent notice from Jerry. Just now, a serious security incident occurred at the North Gate. A suspected infected individual attacked the guards. They had been neutralized by the police. Unfortunately, two guards were injured and have been sent to the hospital. The North Gate is temporarily closed. All entry and exit will be rerouted to the East Gate with heightened screening. Residents, please do not go outside unless absolutely necessary, and remain vigilant. I immediately replied to Jerry. Based on what I know, people who suffer bite wounds are highly likely to turn within a very short period of time. I recommend immediate quarantine for anyone who has come into contact with the infected person, including the guards and residents who helped handle the incident. Jerry quickly responded, we have reported this to higher authorities and are waiting for professionals to handle it. Currently, the complex has activated its emergency plan. We are deploying extra personnel for patrols. Report any anomaly immediately. The atmosphere in the group chat is growing increasingly tense. Someone started proposing to form a volunteer defense force, while someone else said we should stockpile more supplies. Another resident suggested sealing off the entrance to each building to prevent the infection from spreading. Facing this chaos of information and advice, I couldn't help but wonder what role I should play. As an ordinary programmer, I have no medical knowledge, nor do I have any experience in emergency management, but I have logical thinking and the ability to analyze problems. Perhaps this is exactly what the current situation needs most. I posted a message to the group. Neighbors, though the situation is urgent, please stay calm. I suggest we first secure our own protection before considering how to help each other. Specifically, 1. Every household should take inventory of their supplies to assess how long they can last. 2. Anyone with special needs, such as chronic patients, pregnant women, or the elderly, please report them here in the group so we can coordinate uniformly. 3. Anyone with professional backgrounds in medicine, security, or supply management, please step forward to form a specialized task force. After this message was sent, the group went quiet for a moment, and then people gradually began to respond. First was an elderly man who introduced himself as a retired doctor, stating he was willing to provide medical advice. Next, a few young people said they could assist with supply deliveries. Someone else suggested we organize floor captains to handle communication and gather needs. Just as the discussion was becoming orderly, a rapid knocking at the door interrupted my thoughts once again. This time, it was my neighbor from 1704 across the hall, a middle-aged man around 50 years old, with whom I had barely interacted before. He was panting heavily, covered in sweat. Mr. Lee, right? I'm Oscar He. I saw in the group chat that you have good ideas, so I came to consult you. My wife just went downstairs to throw out the trash, and she saw someone crouching in the corner of the elevator lobby. They were acting very strange, shaking constantly, and making bizarre noises from their mouth. My heart jumped. Where is that person right now? Still in the elevator lobby. My wife hurried back inside our apartment. I wanted to call the police, but they're probably too overwhelmed right now. Didn't the group chat say management is handling things? but I tried calling management, and the line has been busy. I quickly grabbed my phone. I sent a message to the property manager, and simultaneously said to Oscar, "Go back home. Lock your door, and do not come out. I'll contact management to handle this." Oscar hesitated for a moment. Should a few of us guys go check it out together? What if it's just a regular person who got sick? I shook my head. It's too dangerous. If it really is an infected person, getting close will only increase the risk. The best way is to wait for the professionals to handle it. After seeing Oscar out, I immediately briefed the group chat on the situation, and specifically warned the residents of the 17th floor not to use the elevators for the time being, and to lock their doors and windows securely. Just as I was waiting for management to reply, a sharp scream suddenly echoed through the hallway, followed by a heavy thud of someone falling to the ground, and a series of frantic footsteps. My heart practically stopped beating. Intuition told me danger had arrived right at my doorstep. I quickly deadbolted the door, and pressed myself against it, listening to the commotion outside. Chaotic sounds echoed through the hallway. Someone was yelling, someone was running, and there was also a bizarre, low growl that barely sounded human. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Oscar. "Call the police. Fast. That person attacked my wife." I just opened the door to check on things, and that person suddenly rushed over trying to bite her. I blocked them with a mop, pulled her back inside, and locked the door. Almost at that exact moment, I heard something slam against my own door once, and then a second time, with even greater force. Immediately after, a spine-chilling scratching sound came from right outside the door, accompanied by heavy, ragged breathing. I held my breath, my mind racing. That infected person was right outside my door, possibly trying to break it down. A standard security door should hold them off for a while, but I couldn't just sit here waiting to die. Looking around, I quickly pushed the shoe cabinet from the entryway right up against the door, then grabbed the largest cleaver from the kitchen, and quietly crept back toward the edge of the door. The slamming and scratching outside lasted for about 2 minutes, before suddenly coming to a halt. I focused all my senses, hearing the voices of other residents echoing in the corridor. It seemed someone had come out to check on the nose. "Oh my god, who is this? It looks like young Kevin from 903. A woman exclaimed. "Don't go near him. Get back inside. Fast," a man warned. Next came a flurry of chaotic footsteps and screams. It appeared the infected person had turned to chase a new target. I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed the property manager's number. The phone rang for a long time before finally connecting. Jerry's exhausted voice came through on the other end. "Mr. Lee, what's wrong? We are very busy right now. There's an infected person on the 17th floor." I stated the situation directly. It might be the resident from 903, and he's actively attacking other residents right now. The other end of the line went silent for a few seconds. "We know. Someone else has already reported it, and security personnel are on their way up. Please stay inside your home, and do not go out. Do you guys have protective gear? These infected people are extremely dangerous. Ordinary people can barely restrain them. We have riot shields and stun batons." Jerry's voice sounded rather uncertain. "The city has already dispatched professionals, but it might take some time." After hanging up the phone, I immediately messaged Oscar to make sure they were safe, and then briefed the group chat on the situation, warning everyone to lock their doors and windows and absolutely not go out. The next half hour was the longest period of time I had ever lived through. The hallway alternately echoed with shouting and slamming, and then fell back into an eerie silence. I sat behind the door clutching the cleaver, ready at any second to deal with a potential break-in. Finally, a synchronized set of footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Looking through the peephole, I saw several people wearing specialized hazmat suits, walking up the stairs. They were holding riot shields and some unknown equipment. Their movements were swift and coordinated. "Where is the infected person?" one of them asked. "Over there, by the elevator," someone answered. Next came a flurry of chaotic noises. I heard the hum of a taser, followed by a heavy dragging sound. A few minutes later, everything fell silent. My phone vibrated. It was a message from the property manager. "The situation on the 17th floor has been contained. The infected individual has been taken away. All residents, please continue to stay inside and do not go out. Staff will sanitize the common areas. Report any further anomalies immediately." I let out a long breath, the muscles across my entire body finally relaxing. But I knew this was just the beginning. If similar situations were happening across the entire city, things would deteriorate rapidly. Walking over to the window, I saw several specially marked vehicles inside the complex. They weren't ordinary police cars or ambulances, but military armored vehicles. A few heavily armed soldiers were setting up a checkpoint at the main gate. An unprecedented atmosphere of tension enveloped the entire community. In the distance, the city skyline remained beautiful, with skyscrapers flickering with lights in the twilight. But who knew what was happening behind those lights? I picked up my phone and sent a message to my parents. "I'm safe. Don't worry. There are some situations over here, but everything is under control. I'll check in regularly to let you know I'm okay." Then I opened my computer and began logging everything that had happened today. If this truly was an unprecedented disaster, then every single detail and every single observation could become absolutely vital. In the glow of the screen, I began to type. January 26th, 2023. At Building 17, Waterfront Estates Complex, City S, witnessed the first infected case. Outside the window, night fell. The city lights flickered in the darkness, like countless pairs of eyes, watching this world as it silently changed. Over the next 3 days, the entire city fell into a bizarre bottleneck. Official media was still reporting it as a special strain of flu, but everyone knew the truth was far more terrifying than that. The military blocked off major roads within the city, and quarantine zones were established around hospitals. Online videos regarding the violence to infected individuals, though swiftly deleted, continued to spread at an astonishing speed. The members of the Building 17 Mutual Aid Group had increased to 94 people, covering almost all the households. I don't know when it started, but everyone tacitly accepted me as the backbone of this group. All sorts of questions and pleas for help came flooding my way. Leo, I heard the supermarkets aren't restocking anymore. My family is almost out of rice. What should we do? The elderly person in my home needs blood pressure medication. Does anyone know where we can still buy some? The neighbor in 103 downstairs ran a fever last night. Should the residents on our floor move away? Facing these questions, I kept reminding myself that I was just a programmer. I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't a police officer. And I certainly wasn't a savior. But every time I saw those panicked, helpless messages in the group, I still couldn't help but want to do something. On the morning of the third day, I was in the kitchen boiling water to make instant noodles when my phone vibrated rapidly. It was a call from Oscar. Mr. Lee, could you please come down for a moment? Something happened over here by the storage rooms on the 7th floor. What kind of situation? I asked vigilantly. It's not an infected person. He hurried to explain. It's an issue with supplies. We discovered that someone hoarded a massive amount of stuff, but many residents are completely out of food right now. People are getting a bit agitated. Hanging up the phone, I put on my clothes, hesitated for a second, and then slipped that cleaver into my backpack anyway. During these past 3 days, 2 more infection incidents had occurred inside the complex, although both were swiftly contained. Who knew where the next one would pop up? Inside the elevator, a striking warning sign was posted. Minimize going outside. Wear your respirator. Report any anomalies immediately. In a corner, someone had scrawled a line with a black marker. If you get bitten, it's over. I reached the 7th floor. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, I heard shouting. Outside the storage room at the end of the hallway, a crowd of over a dozen people had gathered. The atmosphere was tense. Oscar looked relieved when he saw me. Mr. Lee is here. In the middle of the crowd, a man in his 40s was standing right in front of the storage room door, anxiously explaining something. Seeing me approach, he raised his voice. I already told you. All of this is my legal property. I spent 3 months stockpiling this through Taobao. This is my own reserve. Why on earth should I give any of it to you? Standing across from him were a few young men. One of them, who looked to be around 25 or 26, was highly agitated. Mr. Chow, these are extraordinary times. Look at how much you've hoarded. This is enough to feed 5 families for a month. Several households in our building are already completely out of food. The man named Chow, whom I recognized as the resident from 701, shook his head. But you guys didn't prepare anything yourself. What does that have to do with me? My wife is pregnant. I have to look out for my own family. The onlookers chimed in all at once. Some people supported Mr. Chow's right to keep his own supplies, while others insisted that resources should be shared. The argument grew increasingly heated. I even saw a few young guys clenching their fists. Everyone, please calm down first, I said, raising my voice as I stepped into the middle of the crowd. Let's clarify exactly what's going on. Oscar briefly explained. Mr. Chow does personal shopping as a proxy agent on Taobao, and he hoarded a vast amount of daily necessities and food in this public storage room on the 7th floor. This morning, someone came down to grab something, saw it by accident, and word spread. Now, since some families are completely out of food, they want to buy some from him, but he refuses. I turned to Mr. Chow. Mr. Chow, could you let me see what you have stored? He hesitated for a moment, but ultimately opened the storage room door anyway. The sight inside made everyone present gasp. The entire storage room, about 10 square meters, was packed almost to capacity. Cases of bottled water were stacked to the ceiling, and bags of rice, flour, and cooking oil were all fully stocked. I run a proxy shopping business, Mr. Chow explained, his voice lacking confidence. These are all my inventory, and they double as my family's reserves. I looked around, taking in those anxious faces, knowing things were bad. If this wasn't handled properly, it could very likely escalate into a violent conflict. And under the current circumstances, any riot could carry fatal risks. Mr. Chow, I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible, I completely understand your desire to protect your family, but these are extraordinary times. The complex is locked down, and supplies cannot be replenished. If this continues, people will go hungry, and the situation will become much harder to control. Then what do you guys want to do? Mr. Chow asked defensively. Rob me of my things? I shook my head. It's not robbing, it's an exchange. We can establish a fair system for sharing supplies. You can keep more than enough for your family's use, and exchange the rest at a reasonable price, with neighbors who are in need. It doesn't strictly have to be for money. It could be for services or other items. Seeing that Mr. Chow was still hesitating, I added. If the situation worsens, it will be very difficult for any single household to survive on their own. We need to unite and help each other. This isn't just for everyone else. It's also for your own safety. A harmonious and stable environment is the best guarantee for you and your family as well. Someone in the crowd echoed. Exactly. What if your family needs help one day? Mr. Cow's expression finally began to soften. Just then, his phone rang. After answering the call, his face turned entirely pale. My wife said she has a fever 100.4 degrees. The scene instantly fell dead silent. Under the current circumstances, everyone knew exactly what running a fever meant. I tried to reassure him. Don't worry. A common cold can also cause a fever. Do you have any fever reducers at home? Mr. Chow shook his head. We're completely out. I wanted to go out and buy some the day before yesterday, but management wouldn't let anyone leave the complex. This was an opportunity. I turned to the crowd. Does anyone have fever reducers at home? A middle-aged woman raised her hand. I have ibuprofen at my place. I have a thermometer here. Someone else said. Mr. Chow looked at these neighbors who were actively offering to help, and the defensiveness in his eyes gradually vanished. He took a deep breath. All right, I agreed to share a portion of the supplies, but I need to keep enough for my own household. Just like that, a potential conflict was diffused. Over the next 2 hours, we took a brief inventory of the goods in the storage room and drafted a preliminary distribution plan. Mr. Chow would keep about 30% of the supplies for personal use, while the rest would be logged into a registry for residents in the complex to request based on their needs. It wasn't a free handout. Rather, items would be acquired through bartering or by providing services. During this process, I noticed that several neighbors demonstrated unique talents. Mrs. Zhou from 801 was a retired accountant who volunteered to help set up the supply ledger. A college student named Zog from 1505 was great with computers and promised to develop a simple inventory management system. A few young, strong men also volunteered to form a delivery team responsible for bringing supplies to families in need. This event marked a major turning point. That evening, I posted a proposal in the mutual aid group. What happened in the 7th-floor storage room today inspired me. During these extraordinary times, any of us could potentially face a shortage of supplies or other difficulties. I suggest we establish a mutual aid and sharing platform to log any idle or surplus supplies into a registry. Those in need can apply for them. It won't be a free handout, but rather acquired through bartering or services to ensure it is fair and reasonable. Suddenly, someone posted a message in the group. Look outside the window. Quick, in the direction of the hospital. I immediately rushed to the window. From my apartment's vantage point, I could see the silhouette of the distant hospital. To my shock, the hospital's previously brightly lit windows all went dark instantly. Immediately after, several red flares streaked across the night sky, illuminating that entire area in a crimson glow. Muffled gunshots erupted as densely as firecrackers. Several military helicopters circled overhead, their massive searchlight beams sweeping across the gaps between the buildings. The group chat instantly blew up. Was that an explosion? Did you hear that sound? I see military vehicles heading over there. Oh no, has the hospital spiraled out of control? Are infected people going to escape? While everyone was making panic guesses, an official news alert was pushed to everyone's phone. Notice from the city's Special Security Command. Tonight at 9:35, an emergency military exercise and riot response operation are being conducted in the area surrounding Central Hospital. Currently, a maximum level lockdown has been enforced in the relevant sector. To avoid accidental injuries, citizens must remain inside their homes. Keep doors and windows tightly shut, and absolutely do not gather to watch or approach the cordon zone. But this only made people feel even more uneasy. Almost simultaneously, Oscar sent me a private message in the group. An old colleague of mine just gave me the real scoop. This is absolutely not an exercise. The containment line inside the hospital collapsed, and a massive horde of infected people has broken out. SWAT is trying to establish a second line of defense, but it looks like they can't hold them back at all. My heart sank. If the hospital truly spiraled out of control, it meant a massive horde of infected individuals could flood the city. Considering how fast the infection spreads, the consequences would be unimaginable. I immediately posted a message in the group chat. No matter what the official announcements say, we must prepare for the worst. Starting right now. Everyone raise your vigilance, minimize going outside, and reinforce the protection on your doors and windows. Each floor will designate a floor captain, responsible for relaying information and reporting the situation. If you notice any anomaly, notify management and everyone in the group immediately. Jerry, the property manager, followed up on behalf of management. Management has been notified to tighten the complex's defenses. The side gates will also be temporarily closed, leaving only a single entry and exit point, with guards stationed 24 hours a day, unless absolutely necessary. Residents, please do not go out. Seeing these messages, the panic in the group eased slightly, but I knew the real challenge might have only just begun. It was late at night. I lay in bed but couldn't sleep at all. The faint glow of my phone screen illuminated the dark room. I kept refreshing various information channels, trying to understand the actual situation in the outside world. Official channels still maintained a restrained tone, repeatedly stating that the outbreak was being effectively contained, and social order remained stable. But from various unofficial channels, I pieced together a much more terrifying reality. Multiple areas across the city had already reported sightings of infected individuals, and some neighborhoods had completely fallen. The military was establishing quarantine and safe zones. The most unsettling part was that the infection seemed to be evolving. The latest reports indicated that some infected individuals demonstrated higher intelligence and coordination capabilities. They were no longer just mindlessly attacking on sight, but would actively search for prey with a purpose, and would even attempt to use simple tools. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone suddenly rang. It was Ryan. "Leo, are you awake?" His voice was very low, seemingly afraid of waking his family. "Yeah, I am. What's up?" "I just received an internal notice. There might be a major operation tomorrow. The military plans to establish a massive safe zone in the city center to centrally relocate uninfected citizens." My heart tightened. "Are we evacuating the complex?" "The current plan is to relocate people in batches." But he hesitated for a second. "The roads will be very dangerous. According to the latest intelligence, the number of infected in the city has already exceeded expectations. Some areas have practically fallen. Then what should we do? If possible, I suggest staying in the complex for now. Waterfront Estates is located in a relatively remote area, so the density of infected individuals is lower. We should wait until the first batch of relocations is finished, and the routes are secure before considering it." This aligned perfectly with my own judgment. Currently, the inside of the complex was relatively safe, as long as we tightened our defenses. There shouldn't be any major problems for the time being. "Ryan, can you look into the details a bit more, especially the evacuation routes and timing? This is crucial for us." "I'll do my best, but communication controls have been very strict lately. A lot of information is being blocked." Hanging up the phone, I fell into deep thought. If a large-scale evacuation truly begins tomorrow, we need to be fully prepared. But before that, there were even more pressing matters to handle. Early the next morning, I gathered the heads of the various task forces we had formed yesterday for a brief online meeting. During the meeting, I shared the potential evacuation plan and emphasized the critical importance of our complex's own defense prior to that. Right now, we have 3 most critical tasks. I summarized: 1. Complete the supply inventory and distribution to ensure every household has basic survival supplies. 2. Reinforce the complex's security, especially at all entrance points and the doors and windows of low-floor units. 3. Establish an information network to ensure updates can be relayed quickly and accurately. After the meeting ended, each team immediately took action. The supply team began conducting a thorough assessment of the supply situation for all residents in the building. The security team, coordinating with management, reinforced all entrance points with heavy objects and wire mesh. The information team, meanwhile, established a more structured reporting system. Each floor designated a floor captain, responsible for passing information up and down the chain. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. Cow's wife's fever broke. The medical team confirmed it was just a common cold. Once this good news spread, the atmosphere throughout the entire building noticeably lightened. While we were busy reinforcing the complex's defenses, the situation in other parts of the city was deteriorating rapidly. Judging from the sporadic news filtering through, the area surrounding the hospital had become a major disaster zone. The number of infected individuals was skyrocketing, and the quarantine zones and checkpoints set up by the military were constantly being breached. The safe perimeter was shrinking step by step. At 6 o'clock in the evening, our supply assessment was basically complete, and the results were deeply concerning. About 20% of the households in the building had only about 2 days of food left. There were also several families with special circumstances, such as those with infants or chronic patients requiring specific medications, who were facing immediate, critical shortages. Based on the assessment results, we drafted a simple supply distribution plan to pool the donations from Mr. Chow and several other well-stocked residents together, prioritizing the needs of families with special circumstances. Next came the ordinary households facing severe shortages. The entire process was open and transparent, and all exchange activities were logged. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the first batch of supplies began to be delivered. Oscar, Zoc, and I pushed a cart borrowed from management, delivering supplies door to door. At every household we reached, we would briefly explain the source of the supplies and the distribution principles, then ask if they had other needs, or what help they could offer in return. To my surprise, many households that seemed short on supplies actually possessed rich resources or skills. In other aspects, the retired electrician from 1002 volunteered to help inspect and repair the electrical circuits. Mrs. Chan from 1204 knew traditional acupressure massage and was willing to provide services to neighbors in need. The young couple from 1603 knew how to make basic protective gear and promised to provide a set of face shields to every household. Just like that, a small community based on mutual aid and bartering gradually took shape. This was not just material support. More importantly, it gave everyone a sense of belonging and security. In this world full of the unknown and terror, we were not alone. At 10:30 in the evening, the supply delivery work finally came to a temporary close. I dragged my exhausted body back into my apartment. Just as I sat down to rest, an emergency siren suddenly blared from my phone. It was the city's air defense siren system. Almost simultaneously, the group chat blew up. What's going on? Why are they sounding the air defense sirens? Are they going to bomb the infected zones? Where is the official notice? Does anyone have concrete information? While everyone was panicking, an official alert push appeared on everyone's phone. Urgent notice, effective immediately. City S is under a curfew between 10 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock the following morning. All pedestrians and vehicles are prohibited from outdoor activities. Violators will face the consequences of their actions. During the curfew hours, the military will conduct containment and clearing operations in certain key sectors. Citizens, please do not go outside. Keep your doors and windows tightly shut, and keep noise to a minimum. In case of emergency, please call the emergency hotline. Immediately after, the roar of helicopters echoed from a distance, and several powerful searchlights swept across the night sky. From my window, I could see several plumes of fire rising in the direction of downtown, and I could faintly hear gunshots and explosions. The war had begun. This was not a war between humans, but a battle for survival between humanity and those who had already lost their humanity. The infected. I stood by the window, watching the distant fires, my heart filled with mixed emotions. 3 days ago, I was just an ordinary programmer, busy working for my year-end bonus, and planning to go home for the holidays. And now, I was leading the neighbors of an entire building to fight an unprecedented disaster together. My phone vibrated again. It was a message from Oscar. Leo, did you see the commotion outside? I heard the military is clearing out the infected zones. I wonder if it will affect us here. I reply, probably not for the time being. Our complex is relatively isolated, and the number of infected here is limited. But just to be safe, everyone needs to step up guard duty tonight, especially the low-floor residents. I suggest organizing people to take turns standing guard and report any abnormalities immediately. Oscar responded quickly. I've already contacted a few young guys, and we're ready to take turns guarding the main lobby downstairs. If you don't mind, could you come down and guide us a bit? Everyone trusts you a lot. I checked the time. It was already close to midnight. But in a moment of crisis, there was no room for hesitation. I'll be right down. I put on my clothes, checked my cleaver and flashlight one more time, and then opened the door and walked toward the elevator. The elevator door slowly closed. In the mirror, I saw my own exhausted but determined eyes. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but at least today, the residents of our building found a way to coexist and help one another. And this might just be the key to surviving the apocalypse. It wasn't just about having enough supplies and protection. More importantly, it was about mutual trust and support. The elevator reached the first floor. The moment the doors opened, I saw several neighbors already gathered in the lobby. Some rudimentary defensive tools were neatly lined up in the corner. Oscar walked toward me, a rare smile on his face. Captain Lee, we've been waiting for you. I couldn't help but smile faintly. Captain Lee, a title that would have sounded absurd to me 3 days ago, now felt strangely appropriate. Yes, in this moment where the world was turning upside down, every single one of us was forced to step into a new role, and I, a programmer who originally only cared about code and debugging, now had to learn to take on the role of a leader, a coordinator, and a protector. All right, let's get started. I looked around and said to this group of temporarily assembled night watchmen, the first thing to make clear is that our purpose is not to fight the infected, but to serve as an early warning system. Report any anomaly immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Safety comes first. Got it. Everyone answered in unison. Got it. Outside the window, the sound of the air defense sirens gradually faded, replaced by the faint sounds of explosions in the night wind and the roar of helicopters. No matter what the outside world became, at least in this tiny community, we had found a way to survive the apocalypse. The morning sunlight filtered through the window. I startled awake on the sofa. Last night's guard duty had lasted until 3 o'clock in the morning. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't even make it to bed. I just collapsed onto the sofa and fell asleep. The city outside was shrouded in an eerie silence. Gone was the usual hustle and bustle of traffic, replaced only by the occasional sound of helicopters. Breaking this silence, I picked up my phone. The screen was cluttered with message notifications, snapping me awake instantly. A massive number of infected found in the East District. The military is evacuating residents on Westlake Row. Anyone know what's happening at the Huan complex? I heard it has already fallen. The most prominent message was the one Oscar sent half an hour ago. Something happened at the south gate. One immediately put on my clothes, grabbed my backpack, and rushed out the door. In the elevator, I ran into Mrs. Joe, who was also hurrying downstairs. Her face was grave. What's going on? I'm not sure. Oscar told me to go to the south gate. When I just passed by the window, I saw quite a few people gathering over there. It looked like they were arguing about something. Mrs. Joe frowned. Everyone's emotions have been highly volatile these past few days. The elevator reached the first floor, and we walked briskly toward the south gate. From a distance, we could see a crowd gathered there, creating a nosy ding. Jerry, the property manager, was standing in the middle, seemingly trying to mediate. As I drew closer, I saw Oscar, blocking the gate along with a few others. Standing across the complex's south gate was a group of unfamiliar faces, about 20 people in tattered clothes, looking exhausted and desperate. What's going on? I walked up to Oscar and asked. The residents from the neighboring Pearl Gardens say their complex has already fallen. They want to come in here for refuge. Oscar lowered his voice. I suspect some of them are infected. Carefully studying the crowd across from us, a few of them indeed looked very wrong. Their faces were flushed, their eyes vacant, and they were unsteady on their feet. But what made it even more heart-wrenching was that there were elderly people and children among them. A young mother was clutching her infant, her eyes filled with pleading. Jerry was explaining, "I'm sorry, but for the safety of the hundreds of people in this complex, we cannot just accept outsiders. If you have relatives or friends in our complex, please provide proof. Please, I beg you." A middle-aged man cried out, "Our complex is completely unlivable now. The infected broke through the walls last night, and we barely managed to escape. We are not infected." Another person shouted, "You can't just leave us here to die." The situation was highly complex. On one hand, out of humanitarian concern, we couldn't just ignore these people crying for help. On the other hand, if we blindly let them in, it could bring a massive risk to our complex. Just as I was hesitating, Ryan and his wife, Chloe, also arrived at the scene. Without a second word, Ryan pulled Oscar and me to the side. "We can't let them in. I just received word that Pearl Gardens was overrun last night. The infection rate exceeds 60%. There are definitely people among the survivors who have been bitten. They just haven't turned yet, but we can't just turn them away like this." Chloe said softly, her hand instinctively stroking her prominent belly, "Especially those children and the elderly. If we let them in, the entire complex will be in danger." Ryan insisted, "This isn't an ordinary crisis. A single infected person could cause an entire building to fall." I looked around, seeing more and more residents gathering, talking among themselves. Some argued for immediate entry out of humanity, while others were resolutely opposed. The scene was growing increasingly chaotic. This was a difficult choice. As someone heavily involved in the complex's mutual aid, my opinion carrying significant weight at this moment, taking a deep breath, I spoke up. "I don't think we can reject them entirely, nor can we accept them without discrimination. We should conduct necessary screenings and isolation." Turning to Jerry, I continued, "Does management have any place we can use as a temporary quarantine station, like the underground garage or the community clubhouse?" Jerry thought for a moment. "The underground garage won't work. It's too open. The clubhouse, however, has independent spaces and facilities. Then here's what I suggest we do. Conduct a preliminary screening on everyone who wants to enter. Anyone showing obvious abnormal symptoms cannot come inside. The others will be housed in the clubhouse, under mandatory containment and observation for at least 3 days, monitored by the medical team. If there are no issues, we can then consider assigning them lodging." Ryan hesitated for a second. "The risk is still incredibly high." "I know. I admit it," I said, "but we can't just leave them to die. If we were the ones trapped outside today, we would also hope someone would lend a helping hand. Though we must have strict prevention and containment measures to ensure the complex's safety." After a heated discussion, everyone ultimately accepted this compromise. Led by Dr. Chan, the retired doctor from the medical team, a preliminary check was conducted on the outsiders. Those with obvious fevers, wounds, or other abnormal symptoms were regretfully turned away at the gate. The remaining 15 people were arranged to stay at the clubhouse temporarily, guarded by volunteers taking turns. Throughout this entire process, the most heart-wrenching part involved that young mother with the infant. Upon examination, Dr. Chong discovered a bite mark on the inside of her arm that had already turned black and festered. This was undeniable, ironclad proof of infection, even though she wept and screamed, begging us to at least take in her baby. We noticed that the infant's swaddling blanket was also stained with a large amount of dark red blood. Furthermore, the child's face was flushed, already showing symptoms of a high fever and convulsions. At that moment, everyone's heart felt like it was being sliced by a knife. Faced with two lives that had effectively been handed a death sentence, any words of comfort seemed hollow and powerless. Forcing ourselves to take them in would only condemn the hundreds of people in the entire refuge to die with them. Ultimately, that mother also seemed to realize the desperate reality. She stopped begging, her eyes vacant as she held her baby tight. We could only watch helplessly as she stumbled, turned around, and vanished into the vast darkness of the night. The faint sound of that infant crying in its mother's arms echoed in my ears for a very, very long time. After settling the outsiders, I gathered the complex's spontaneously formed crisis response task force for a meeting, including the property manager, Jerry, Ryan, who had a police background, the retired doctor, Dr. Chong, and several neighbors who actively participated in mutual aid. What happened today is just the beginning, I said straightforwardly. As the situation in the city deteriorates, more and more people will flood toward relatively safe places, including our complex. We need to develop more comprehensive defense and response strategies. Ryan nodded. According to the information I got, the military has already abandoned clearing operations in certain sectors, turning instead to concentrate their forces on protecting the core safe zones. Our area is already in a gray zone. We're basically on our own now. This news weighed heavily on everyone's heart. If even the military couldn't contain the situation, what could we ordinary citizens do? We can at least reinforce our own defenses, Oscar said. Reinforce the perimeter walls, control the entry and exit points, and organize patrol teams. Supplies are also an issue. Mrs. Zhou chimed in. At our current rate of consumption, even including the shared supplies we inventoried yesterday, the entire building can only last about 2 weeks at most. And then there's the medical issue. The old doctor, Dr. Chan, said with deep concern. We are already running short on medicine. If a large number of sick or injured people emerge, It will be very difficult for us to handle. For a moment, the meeting room fell silent. Everyone was digesting these brutal realities, thinking about possible solutions. We need to divide the work and cooperate. I finally broke the silence. Every single issue is critical, but they all have a potential solution. First, regarding security. Ryan, you have a background in law enforcement. Could you take the lead in organizing our defensive operations? Ryan nodded. I can organize a patrol team and draw up a defense plan, but I'll need personnel and equipment. Management has some basic tools and walkie-talkies that we can provide for the patrol team's use. Jerry said, I can also coordinate with other able-bodied property staff to get them involved. Mrs. Joe will continue to oversee the supply issues. I continued assigning tasks. Please organize a team to conduct another thorough inventory of all potential resources inside the complex, including the shops on the commercial strip. There might still be undiscovered reserves. Dr. Chan will take the lead on medical matters, aside from watching over the outsiders at the clubhouse. Please also prepare to handle potential sicknesses or injuries. After assigning the main tasks, I emphasized once more. The most important things are information sharing and decision transparency. Each group needs to report in at least once a day, and critical situations must be broadcasted immediately. All key decisions must go through a collective discussion. Once the meeting concluded, every task force immediately swung into action. Ryan took over a dozen volunteers and began inspecting and reinforcing the complex's perimeter walls. Mrs. Zhou organized her team to update the supply inventory door to door. Dr. Chan, meanwhile, set up a rudimentary medical station at the clubhouse and began observing the isolated individuals. Oscar and I were responsible for coordinating everyone's efforts while keeping lines of communication open with the outside world. Through various channels, we pieced together an updated map of the city's status. Nearly one-third of City S had already fallen. The military was evacuating vital facilities and personnel, and it was expected that over the next few days, they would abandon even more peripheral sectors. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Ryan came back in a rush to report. We found 2 weak spots on the southern wall and have temporarily reinforced them. But the most concerning part is the northwest corner. It's right next to an abandoned construction site. If a large horde of infected individuals passes through there, our perimeter wall will hardly stand a chance. I thought for a moment, can we completely seal that site off using cement or other materials? Ryan shook his head. We don't have enough materials, and it requires time. I suggest we establish a primary defensive post there and arrange personnel to stand guard 24 hours a day. Just like that, the northwest corner became our outpost. Several residents with military or police backgrounds took turns standing guard, equipped with rudimentary weapons and walkie-talkies. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Dr. Chan brought back some relieving news. None of the temporarily housed outsiders had shown any abnormal symptoms so far, and everyone's emotional state was generally stable. But at the same time, he also warned us. The incubation period of the virus might be changing. We cannot completely let our guard down. As night fell, I stood on the roof of the building, overlooking the city that was once familiar, but now felt entirely alien. In the distance, bursts of fire and explosions flashed occasionally, and the searchlights from helicopters sliced sharp beams of light through the darkness. City S, the place where I had lived for 5 years, was plunging into the abyss bit by bit. Meanwhile, our tiny waterfront estates felt like an isolated island, temporarily floating in the torrent of the apocalypse. What are you thinking about? Oscar's voice came from behind me. Thinking about how long we can hold out. I answered honestly. Supplies, safety, human nature, every single one, is a massive challenge. Oscar walked up beside me and handed me a bottle of water. I just came back from the clubhouse after checking on those outsiders. You know what? A little boy among them asked me why the people outside became so terrifying. I didn't know how to answer him. I fell silent for a moment. Maybe one day, we'll know the answer. Right now, we just need to survive and protect the people around us. You know what? Oscar suddenly smiled. A week ago, I was still stressing over layoffs at my company. My wife was still complaining that I wouldn't go shopping with her. And we were still bickering endlessly over remodeling styles. Looking back now, those worries were so incredibly trivial. I smiled too. A week ago, my biggest stress was finishing that damn payment system and rushing back to my hometown before the holidays. Now, I have no idea what the situation is like back there. Long distance calls stopped going through a while ago. As I said this, a deep wave of homesickness surged in my heart. Were my parents okay? Had the small town where I grew up suffered the exact same disaster? These questions haunted me like ghosts, yet there was no way to get an answer. Any word from your parents' side? Oscar seemed to read my mind. I shook my head. When we last spoke 3 days ago, they said, things were still relatively quiet on their end. But now all long-distance communications are down. I can only pray they're safe. They'll be fine. Oscar patted my shoulder. The countryside is much safer than the city. The population density is low, so the risk of the infection spreading is small. I hoped he was right. But in this world filled with uncertainty, hope felt like a luxury item. Just as we stood on the roof in silence, Ryan's frantic voice suddenly blared over the walkie-talkie. Anomaly detected at the northwest corner. Repeating, anomaly detected at the northwest corner. Oscar and I immediately bolted from the roof and rushed toward the northwest corner. Along the way, more and more volunteers joined us, clutching various rudimentary weapons. Iron bars, kitchen knives, And someone even had a tennis racket. When we arrived at the northwest corner, the sight before us was spine-chilling. Under the dim streetlights, over a dozen figures were moving slowly from the direction of the construction site. Their movements were stiff and uncoordinated, letting out low, hair-raising growls. Infected, Ryan whispered. At least 15 of them, maybe more. There were only 3 volunteers at the northwest outpost, and they had already retreated inside the perimeter wall, calling for backup over their walkie-talkies. Although the perimeter wall was still relatively sturdy, if a large horde of infected individuals focused their attack, it was hard to say how long it could hold out. Jerry, the property manager, arrived at the scene, his face pale as a sheet. What should we do? Should we call the police? Calling the police won't do anything. Ryan shook his head. Their force was stretched thin a long time ago. We have to rely on ourselves. I quickly scanned the surrounding environment, searching for available resources. Just outside the northwest perimeter wall was a half-finished construction site. Various building materials and heavy machinery were scattered across it. The infected were approaching from that direction, demonstrating a clear group movement pattern. This differed from the early reports, indicating they might be evolving. I have an idea. I suddenly spoke up. The infected are highly sensitive to sound. They get attracted to it. If we can create a sound source, we can lure them away. That's too dangerous. Oscar objected immediately. Who would go out there to be the bait? We don't need a person, I explained. There are bulldozers and excavators on the construction site. If we can start them up, the noise will be enough to attract the infected. Ryan's eyes lit up. That makes sense, but who knows how to operate those machines? Everyone looked at each other in silence. Everyone present was just an ordinary citizen. No one knew how to drive heavy construction machinery. Just as we hit a total deadlock, a raspy voice came from behind us. I do. I turned around to look. It was Mr. Won from A1, a retired construction worker. He stepped forward and said, I worked in construction for 30 years. I know how to drive all of those machines. If I can be of any help, I'm willing to give it a shot. That's too dangerous, Jerry said with concern. There are already infected individuals over there. It's not that complicated. Mr. Won said, I'm familiar with that small excavator on the construction site. The key is usually left in the ignition, as long as we can get close to it. Starting it up will be easy. The critical part is to distract the infected. After a brief discussion, we formulated a plan. A few young, strong volunteers would make noise on this side of the perimeter wall to attract the infected, while Mr. Won, accompanied by 2 guards, would slip out through the complex's east gate and approach the construction site as quietly as possible to start the excavator. Once the machinery was running, they would immediately retreat to the complex. With the plan finalized, we went into action right away. Several volunteers began banging on metal inside the wall and shouting, which quickly caught the attention of the infected. They turned toward the wall and began slamming against it and climbing, letting out spine-chilling screeches. At the same time, Mr. Wong and his 2 guards quietly left the complex, taking a detour toward the construction site. Over 10 minutes passed. The situation by the perimeter all grew increasingly tense. Some of the infected had already begun trying to scale it, even though the wall was over 3 meters high. They demonstrated an astonishing persistence, just as we were worrying about whether the plan would succeed. The roar of an engine suddenly echoed from a distance. As the sound grew louder, it successfully drew the attention of the infected. They stopped their assault on the wall and turned to move toward the source of the noise. A few minutes later, the lights on the excavator at the construction site flared to life. The vehicle began to move, making a massive racket. As if under a spell, all of the infected rushed toward the excavator. We waited anxiously for the return of Mr. Wong and the guards, praying they would make a safe escape. When Mr. Wong and the 2 guards returned to the complex out of breath, everyone let out a massive sigh of relief. Mr. Wong explained excitedly, I set the excavator to slowly move forward, with the lights on and the horn blaring. It'll keep moving for a while, drawing those monsters further and further away. This makeshift solution successfully defused the crisis at the northwest corner. But it also served as a wake-up call for us. Our defensive line was not as ironclad as we had imagined. It could face a breach at any moment. Returning to the building, we called an emergency meeting and decided to step up our defensive measures. We would increase patrol personnel, set up barricades at critical locations, and prepare basic weapons and escape routes. At the same time, we began training more people to master basic defensive skills, including how to evacuate safely and how to treat minor injuries. It was late at night when I actually made it back to my apartment. As I collapsed onto my bed completely exhausted, my phone suddenly vibrated with a message. It was from an unknown number, and the text was very brief. Infected appeared in the dorm area. Situation is out of control. I've been bitten. I'm sorry, Kevin. My heart dropped instantly into a bottomless pit. Kevin, the very coworker who had first passed the truth of the outbreak to me, had now become one of the infected. His cousin was at the hospital, and he himself was in the dorm area, while I was in this complex that was still temporarily safe. Why is fate so incredibly unjust? I tried to reply to the message, but the recipient was already unreachable. I didn't know if he still retained his sanity right now, if he was enduring the agony brought on by the virus, or if he had already turned into one of those entities that pose a threat to humanity. I tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. Not just out of concern for the complex's safety, but even more so due to a profound sense of despair. It was because of a terrifying thought that welled up deep within me. What if, one day, I get infected too? Will I be like Kevin, using my final moments of sanity to say goodbye to my loved ones? And what's even more frightening is, how many other people, in this world, are currently experiencing the exact same fear and despair. The next morning, I was startled awake by a frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find Ryan standing outside, his expression grave. Something happened at the clubhouse. Young Kevin from 903 is infected. My heart sank instantly. What do you mean? Wasn't he isolated a few days ago? On the surface, it seems so. Ryan explained, but last night, he slipped out when the watchmen weren't paying attention. He claimed he went to look for his girlfriend. When he came back in the middle of the night, he already had symptoms of infection. The wound is on his abdomen. It looks like a bite mark. How many people did he contact? I asked urgently. At least a dozen, including all the outsiders in the clubhouse. And several watchmen. Ryan's voice was full of anxiety. We've already locked down the clubhouse, but the situation is highly complex. Kevin's symptoms are developing much faster than anything we've seen before, and he's far more aggressive. I quickly put on my clothes and rushed to the clubhouse with Ryan. On the way, he gave me more details. Kevin had already started running a fever when he came back, but he didn't report it immediately. 2 hours later, he began exhibiting clear violent behavior and attacked one of the watchmen. Right now, he has completely lost his mind and is locked inside the clubhouse storage room. However, several other people have started showing similar symptoms. When we arrived at the clubhouse, a cordon tape had already been put up around the scene. Jerry, the property manager, and a few guards stood at the entrance, their expressions tense. Dr. Chung was currently examining a pale-faced watchman. Seeing us arrive, he shook his head, signaling that things were bad. Kevin has completely turned, the doctor said. It was faster than any case we've seen before. On top of that, 3 of the contacts have already started running a fever, and one of them has shown aggressive behavior. I looked around, seeing over a dozen pairs of panicked eyes staring at us, hoping for a solution, but faced with an unknown, fatal virus. What could we ordinary people really do? Taking a deep breath, I looked at Ryan. We need to implement zone isolation. Put those who already show symptoms into a separate room. Close contacts go into another room, and everyone else stays in a separate area. At the same time, lock down the entire clubhouse, no one goes in or out. Ryan nodded, and immediately began making arrangements. But Jerry raised a brutal question. If they all end up infected, how do we handle them? No one dared to answer this question, caught between the fear of a spreading infection and basic humanitarianism. Every single one of us was struggling. Let's bring the situation under control first, I finally said, and then we can discuss the next step. Dr. Chan, can you estimate how long it takes from infection to full turn? Dr. Chan thought for a moment. Based on my observations, the virus this time seems to be evolving. From the time Kevin was bitten to when he completely lost his mind, it only took about 4 hours. This is much faster than the initial reports. 4 hours. This meant our reaction time was extremely limited. If a large-scale infection broke out inside the clubhouse, the entire complex would soon face an immense danger. Just as we were discussing our strategy, a sharp scream suddenly echoed from inside the clubhouse, followed by the heavy thud of someone hitting the ground and the sound of breaking glass. What's going on? Ron asked vigilantly, addressing a volunteer who was running out from inside the clubhouse. The volunteer reported, in pure terror, Mr. 1 in room number 2 is having an episode. He attacked the caregivers, and now he's trying to break out of the room. The situation was worse than anticipated. The infection was spreading before our very eyes, and our defensive line was collapsing. The next few hours were the longest, most agonizing moments of my life. We tried to reinforce the clubhouse lockdown, while urgently evacuating residents within the complex, who lived near the clubhouse area. Management activated their contingency plan, cutting off a portion of the clubhouse's electricity and water supply, hoping to contain the movement range of the infected. Around noon, the situation took a sharp turn for the worse. 6 people inside the clubhouse had fully turned. They began acting in coordination, attempting to shatter the doors and windows. Even worse, at least 10 others were showing early symptoms, and were expected to turn very soon. Ron pulled me aside, his voice heavy. Leo, we have to make a decision. The line at the clubhouse won't hold much longer. If those infected break out, the entire complex will be compromised. What do you suggest? I asked, though I had already guessed the answer in my heart. The military has standard protocols for dealing with infected zones. Ryan said with great difficulty, a total lockdown. If necessary, he didn't finish his sentence, but I understood exactly what he meant. This was an unimaginable choice. Sacrifice the dozens of people inside the clubhouse, or let the hundreds of residents in the entire complex face total annihilation. Logically speaking, the choice seemed clear. But from a human standpoint, it was a decision almost too heavy to bear. We don't have the right to decide the life or death of others, I said softly, my voice trembling with intense emotion. There must be another way. But time waits for no one. When the first window of the clubhouse was shattered, and the head of an infected person poked through, Ryan hesitated no longer. He pulled out his walkie-talkie and issued the command, execute Plan B. Repeating, execute Plan B. Following that, several volunteers with military or police backgrounds quickly went into action. They barricaded all roads leading to the clubhouse, setting up makeshift roadblocks And then, I couldn't bring myself to watch what happened next with my own eyes. I only remember walking back to my apartment, closing the door, curling up on my bed, listening to the sounds echoing from a distance, feeling an overwhelming exhaustion and crushing guilt. This was the brutal reality of the apocalypse. Sometimes, in order to survive, we are forced to make unimaginable choices. These choices will be forever etched into the souls of the survivors, becoming permanent scars. Toward evening, Oscar came knocking at my door. He didn't mention a thing about the clubhouse, merely stating simply, "New infected found in the West District. We need to reinforce the line." I nodded mechanically, following him toward the West District of the complex. Along the way, the atmosphere within the community was noticeably much more tense. Residents were moving in a frantic hurry, keeping their distance from one another, their eyes filled with vigilance and terror. This was a war with no visible smoke, yet the front line was closing in step by step on every single one of us. 3 days after that incident, the atmosphere inside the complex had completely transformed. The once friendly, helpful neighborly relationships had become strained and fragile. The distance between people was not only physical, but psychological as well. In the eyes of everyone looking at a stranger, there was nothing but suspicion and defensiveness, utterly terrified that the other person might be the next hidden infected. Conversations in the mutual aid group had also become subdued and cautious. No one brought up what had happened at the clubhouse, as if it were a collective nightmare. As long as it wasn't spoken aloud, we could pretend it had never occurred. But reality ruthlessly reminded us that the outside world was collapsing, and our little island was being eroded bit by bit. This morning, I was in the kitchen boiling noodles, when the doorbell suddenly rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw Ryan standing outside, his expression grave. I opened the door to let him in, and he got straight to the point. "Something's wrong with the supplies." "What's wrong?" I asked vigilantly. "Last night, someone snuck into our public supply storage room and took a large amount of food and medicine." Ryan's voice was full of anger. "It's at least enough to feed 5 or 6 families for a week." I frowned. Did the security cameras catch who it was? The cameras were intentionally turned off. Ryan shook his head. Only someone familiar with the complex could have done it. This news felt like a heavy punch, straight to my chest. In this crisis-ridden moment, someone actually chose to betray the collective, stealing our shared survival supplies. This wasn't just a loss of materials, but even more so, a fatal blow to the entire complex's trust system. "What does Mrs. Joe say?" I asked. Mrs. Joe was in charge of supply management and knew the inventory status best. "She's tallying the exact losses, but the situation is more severe than we thought. It's not just food and medicine. Some tools and weapons are also missing." My heart sank. What did missing tools and weapons imply? Was someone preparing to escape on their own? Or was there an even more terrifying motive? "We can't announce this publicly, otherwise it'll cause a panic. Notify the core members first. Have everyone gather at my place in an hour." Ryan nodded and turned to leave. Watching his retreating figure, I couldn't help but think of his utter ruthlessness during the clubhouse incident. Although that decision might have saved the entire complex, the price paid was dozens of human lives and a permanent scar inside everyone's hearts. An hour later, Oscar, Mrs. Joe, Jerry, and Dr. Chan all arrived at my apartment. I briefly introduced the situation, then asked Mrs. Joe to explain the losses in detail. According to the audit, the missing supplies include 5 bags of rice, 3 cases of instant noodles, 2 cases of canned goods, various medications especially antibiotics and fever reducers, some flashlights, batteries, and a few kitchen knives and tools. Mrs. Joe's voice trembled slightly. "Based on our distribution standards, these supplies could have supported the basic needs of at least 7 or 8 families for a week. Are there any leads?" Oscar asked. "Did the cameras really catch absolutely nothing?" Jerry shook his head. "The cameras were shut down professionally. It's not something an ordinary resident could pull off." "Could it be an outsider?" Dr. Chang raised a question. "Even though containment is tight, we can't rule out the possibility of someone slipping in." Ryan dismissed that possibility. "Patrols around the complex are very strict. If there were an outsider, they would definitely be spotted. Furthermore, the culprit is far too familiar with the storage locations and the surveillance system. It was absolutely one of our own." A wave of silence followed. The phrase "one of our own" sounded incredibly piercing in the current context. The mutual aid system we had always been so proud of had actually developed such a severe fracture. In the face of this crisis, if this matter is made public, it will deal a fatal blow to the trust within the complex. I broke the silence, though we can't just pretend nothing happened either. "I have a suspicion." Oscar spoke up hesitantly. "Could this be backlash from the clubhouse incident?" After that happened, quite a few people were highly dissatisfied with how we handled things. This suspicion hit the nail on the head. The clubhouse incident had indeed fractured the opinions of the residents. One group believed it was necessary, that the sacrifice protected the majority. The other group, however, believed that our decision was far too cruel and violated humanitarian principles. No matter what the motive is, stealing public supplies is completely unacceptable. Ron said firmly, "We must find the responsible parties and deal with them severely. Otherwise, more people will follow suit in the future." "But how do we find them?" Mrs. Joe asked a critical question. "There's no surveillance footage, no eyewitnesses. Where do we even begin investigating?" I thought about it for a moment. Judging by the types and quantities of the supplies, This is highly likely the work of a small group rather than an individual. I suggest taking a two-pronged approach. First, observe whose supplies suddenly become abundant. Second, monitor any suspicious group movements. After some discussion, we decided not to announce the theft to all the residents for the time being. Instead, we would secretly tighten supply management and monitoring, while expanding the patrol perimeter, paying special attention to the edges of the complex, to prevent anyone from leaving with a large number of supplies. Once the meeting concluded, everyone left with a heavy heart. Ryan was the last one to leave. At the door, he paused his footsteps. Leo, I don't want to sound discouraging, but the collapse of human nature might be even more terrifying than the virus. I had no words to counter that, because deep down, I knew he was right. Over the next 2 days, we quietly stepped up monitoring across the complex, especially regarding a few residents acting abnormally. Although we lacked direct evidence, a few suspicious targets gradually surfaced. Among them, the most prominent were a few households in Building 11. They had been keeping an exceptionally low profile lately, rarely showing their faces in public. But according to the patrol team's observations, there seemed to be frequent interactions among them. On the morning of the third day, Oscar hurriedly found me. We have a lead. Last night, the patrol team discovered some traces at the northeast corner. It looks like someone tried to scale the perimeter wall from there, and some food packaging was left behind beside it. This was a breakthrough. We immediately headed to the scene to inspect it. The northeast corner was a remote spot in the complex. People rarely went there under normal circumstances. There were indeed distinct climbing marks on the perimeter wall, and a few instant noodle wrappers were scattered on the ground, along with an empty medicine bottle. Looks like someone was preparing to secretly leave the complex, Ryan said, examining the traces, but for some reason, their plan was interrupted. What should we do? Oscar asked. Go straight and confront those suspicious residents. I thought for a moment, no. That would tip them off. I have a better idea. Let's pretend we are organizing a collective supply redistribution. We'll require every single household to declare their existing supplies, and then conduct a fair redistribution. That would force out those who are hoarding or stealing supplies, Ryan added, finishing my thought, because if they refuse to participate or lie about their quantities, it will make them look highly suspicious. Just like that, coordinating with management, we issued a notice to the entire complex. Due to an upgrade in the supply management system, we require all residents to declare the supplies currently in their homes within 24 hours, so we can carry out a fair allocation and ensure everyone can make it through this crisis. As soon as the notice went out, the complex immediately erupted into a flurry of discussion. The majority of people expressed understanding and support for this arrangement, but there were also some voices expressing dissatisfaction, arguing that this violated private property rights. Why on earth should the things I hoarded myself be brought up to be shared with others? A middle-aged man publicly objected in the group chat. It's the apocalypse right now. Every man for himself. This is not a forced confiscation, but a reasonable allocation. I responded in the group. No one is going to take your things away for free. We just want to ensure everyone has the basics, survival supplies, and use the surplus supplies to help those who are truly in need. The debate grew increasingly heated, and the residents clearly began splitting into two factions. One side supported collectivism, believing that only through unity and mutual aid could we survive the apocalypse. The other side insisted on individualism, believing that in times of crisis, self-preservation must come first. This divide didn't just exist over the supply distribution issue, but extended to the complex's defense, the acceptance of outsiders, and various aspects of resource utilization. The once tightly knit community began to fracture. At 7 o'clock in the evening, as I was organizing the supply declaration forms, the doorbell rang again. It was Mr. Liu from Building 11, a middle-aged man in his 40s. He didn't usually talk much, but he had always actively participated in community events. Mr. Li, can I come in and talk? His expression was serious and tense. I let him in. After closing the door, he looked around, lowering his voice. I know who stole the supplies. My heart jumped, but I maintained a calm exterior. Who? A few households in Building 11. They formed a small group and are planning to leave the complex. Mr. Liu said, I'm their neighbor, and I overheard their conversation by accident. They believe the complex will fall sooner or later, so they want to leave early and head to the military safe zone in the west. Why did they have to steal the public supplies? I asked, perplexed. If they want to leave, they can request their own share. Mr. Liu gave a bitter smile, because they need more than just their own share. The road is full of dangers, so they need extra food and medicine as a safety net, or potentially to use for bartering and bribes. And he hesitated for a second. They are highly dissatisfied with how the clubhouse incident was handled. They think the complex leadership is cruel and ruthless, and not to be trusted. This information left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, stealing public supplies was wrong, but on the other hand, I could understand their fear and dissatisfaction. In a moment of life or death, everyone has the right to choose their own way of survival. When are they planning to leave? I asked. Tomorrow night. They've already contacted people on the outside, and a vehicle will be waiting to meet them. I thanked Mr. Liu for the information. After he left, I immediately contacted Ryan and Oscar. Briefly relaying the situation, we should stop them. Ryan said resolutely, stealing public supplies is a betrayal of everyone. But if they truly want to leave, do we have the right to stop them? Oscar raised the question. Everyone has freedom of choice, don't they? There was no simple answer to this question. In a normal society, people naturally have the right to freedom of movement. But in the current apocalyptic environment, all the rules had been rewritten. Leaving the complex meant immense risks, not only for the ones leaving, but potentially posing a threat to those staying behind as well. What if they get infected outside and try to come back? After a heated discussion, we ultimately reached a compromise. We wouldn't stop their plan to leave, but we would require them to return the stolen public supplies and forfeit the subsequent shares allocated to them by the complex. Furthermore, once they left, they could never return to the complex, ensuring the collective's safety. Late the next morning, I headed over to Building 11 myself and found the representative for those households, a young man named Ethan Wu. When I stated my purpose straightforwardly, he was startled at first, but swiftly regained his composure. Looks like our plan has been exposed, he said calmly. So, what do you guys plan to do with us? We won't stop you from leaving, I told him directly, but there are a few conditions. 1. Return the stolen public supplies. 2. Forfeit all your rights within the complex once you leave. 3. Promise not to return to the complex if you get infected. Ethan clearly hadn't expected this kind of response. He fell silent for a moment, then asked, why aren't you stopping us? You completely have the power to, because everyone has the right to choose their own path. I answered, even in the apocalypse, we should do our best to maintain some basic baseline of humanity, but by the same token, you cannot compromise the interests of those staying behind, just because of your own choice. After some deliberation, Ethan agreed to my conditions. That very afternoon, the majority of the stolen supplies were returned, with only a small amount already consumed. In exchange, we promised not to interfere, and they left, and even arranged for personnel to help them safely scale the complex's perimeter wall. This outcome left Ryan highly dissatisfied. You're too merciful, he told me privately. This will only encourage more people to follow suit. Maybe. I gave a bitter smile. But when the world becomes this cruel, holding on to a bit of humanity is perhaps our last distinction from those monsters. At 8 o'clock in the evening, a modified SUV drove silently into the northeast corner of the complex. Ethan and his companions, a total of 7 adults and 2 children, carrying light luggage and food, walked toward the designated spot. Oscar and I watched everything silently from a distance. As agreed, we sent 2 volunteers to assist them over the wall, ensuring the process wouldn't make too much noise and attract the infected. Do you think they can make it to the safe zone alive? Oscar asked softly. I shook my head. The chances are slim, but that was their own choice. Watching them disappear one by one into the night, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. Maybe Ryan was right. I was too merciful, but as the world rapidly collapses, maybe mercy, more than coldness, can preserve our final dignity as human beings. Early the next morning, news of the Building 11 residents' collective departure spread throughout the complex. People were talking up a storm. Some admired their courage, while others thought they were foolish and selfish. But what was even more concerning was that this event triggered a series of chain reactions. More and more people began to discuss privately whether they should also leave the complex to find a safer place. The progress of the supply declaration slowed down noticeably. Many people began to conceal the actual supply situation in their homes. Some previously active volunteers stopped participating in public affairs, and some even began to question the decisions of the current leadership. At a meeting of the core members, Dr. Chan said with deep concern once again, the community's cohesion is declining. If this continues, the mutual aid system we worked so hard to build will collapse. Jerry nodded. Lately, the patrol team is also short-staffed. Many volunteers make excuses not to show up. That's only human nature. Mrs. Zhou sighed. When hope is slim, people naturally think of themselves and their families first. Facing this situation, we had to take action. After some discussion, we decided to implement several measures to stabilize people's minds. First, increase information transparency. We formed an intelligence team to regularly gather and publish the latest updates on each area of the city, including the spread of the infection, military operations, and potential evacuation routes, giving residents a clearer understanding of the outside world. Second, optimize the supply distribution mechanism. Second, adjust the supply distribution mechanism. We will no longer emphasize complete equality. Instead, after basic needs are secure, appropriate rewards will be given for extra contributions, motivating more people to participate in public affairs. Third, strengthen community culture building. On the premise of ensuring safety, we will organize some small-scale activities, such as psychological mutual aid meetings between floors, and children's book clubs, to ease residents' tension and enhance their sense of belonging. After these measures were implemented, they did achieve some positive results, especially the transparency of information. It greatly reduced rumors and panic. When people learned that the safe zone in the city's West District was actually already overcrowded, and that the military was moving vital facilities to the north, the urge to leave the complex became less intense. However, just as we were working hard to stabilize the situation, an even larger crisis quietly closed in. On the morning of the 5th day, Ryan rushed over, his expression more serious than ever before. A massive cluster of infected has appeared in the East District. At least 30 to 50 of them. Their movements are coordinated, and they seem to be purposely moving toward our complex. My heart sank. How far away from us? Less than 2 kilometers. At their current moving speed, they'll reach the perimeter of the complex by night at the earliest. This news was a total bombshell. Although we had been constantly reinforcing the complex's defense, we had never faced such a massive cluster of infected. If we are overrun, the consequences will be unimaginable. I immediately called an emergency meeting, which all core members and building representatives attended. At the meeting, Ryan detailed the threat situation and then put forward his suggestion. We have two choices. One is to reinforce our defenses and defend the complex to the death. The second is to organize an orderly evacuation before the infected arrive, heading to the military safe point in the North District. The meeting immediately fell into a heated argument. The risks of staying were obvious, but evacuating was equally dangerous. We would have to traverse several kilometers of city streets, where we could encounter the infected at any moment along the way. Furthermore, who could guarantee the North District was truly safe? What made it even more complicated was that not everyone had the ability to evacuate. There were elderly people, pregnant women, and children in the complex, and they could become the most vulnerable link. During an emergency evacuation, we cannot abandon those who cannot evacuate on their own. Dr. Chan said firmly, that goes against the principles we've always upheld. But if we stay, everyone could be in danger. Ryan countered, sometimes we have to make hard choices. The argument grew increasingly heated, and people split into two distinct factions. One side supported staying to defend to the death, while the other side advocated for leaving as early as possible. Meanwhile, as the de facto coordinator of the complex, I had to make a decision. Under the expectant gazes of everyone, I cleared my throat. I think the most rational plan is a split operation for the vulnerable land residents with special needs. Stay in the complex, and we will reinforce our defenses. Residents who are able can choose to evacuate, but they must form an organized team. No individual action is allowed. This compromise triggered a new round of debate. Those staying behind worried that the defensive force would be insufficient, while those evacuating worried that the group would slow them down and increase the risks. Everyone had valid concerns. But under the current circumstances, there was no perfect solution. Ultimately, the meeting ended with a reluctant consensus. We would complete the redistribution of personnel and supplies within 6 hours, dividing into two teams, those staying and those evacuating, and each would draft a detailed plan. No matter what anyone chose, they had to abide by the collective decision. Unauthorized actions were strictly prohibited. After the meeting ended, Ryan pulled me aside. I'm not sure this is the best choice. Splitting our forces might lead to failure on both sides. I know, I said exhaustedly, that the current situation no longer allows us to judge things by simple right and wrong. Every choice carries a risk. All we can do is try to minimize casualties. Over the next few hours, the entire complex plunged into busy and tense preparations. Residents signed up for different teams, based on their own situations and wishes. Not surprisingly, the number of people choosing to stay was higher than we anticipated. Many young people and capable adults actively chose to stay behind to protect the elderly and children, instead of seeking their own safety. This silent solidarity and spirit of sacrifice allowed me, at this very moment, to see the most beautiful side of human nature. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the allocation work was basically complete. The stay-behind team accounted for about 60% of the total population, including all the elderly, children, pregnant women, and some voluntary security personnel. The evacuation team accounted for about 40%, mostly young and strong adults. They would set out before dark, attempting to reach the safe point in the North District. Supplies were also fairly distributed. The stay-behind team retained more food and defensive gear because they were facing a war of attrition. The evacuation team received more portable food, medicine, and tools to handle various situations along the way. At 6 o'clock in the evening, evacuation preparations were complete. I stood at the east gate of the complex, watching the residents who were about to leave. Every single one of their faces was etched with complex emotions, fear, reluctance, but also a glimmer of hope. Ryan was the leader of the evacuation team. As a former police officer, he had extensive tactical experience and emergency response capabilities, making him the absolute best candidate for this dangerous mission. Take care. I shook his hand. If you reach the safe zone smoothly, signal us as soon as possible. You guys too. Ryan gripped my hand tightly. Hold the complex, and wait for us to bring back reinforcements. As the last ray of sunlight vanished beneath the horizon, the evacuation team, led by Ryan, quietly departed from the complex. I stood where I was, watching their figures disappear into the night, praying silently in my heart for their safety. However, an even greater challenge awaited those of us staying behind. In the dead of night, a spine-chilling sound faintly echoed from a distance. It was the low hiss made by a large horde of infected moving together, sounding like a prelude to death, closing in step by step on our final sanctuary. I stood on the roof, gazing into the darkness of the east. I knew that tomorrow would be a battle of life and death. Whether the defensive line we built could hold off those monsters who had lost their humanity, and whether the trust and unity established between us could endure in the face of death. All of this would be revealed when dawn arrived. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I was startled awake by Oscar's frantic knocking at my door. Leo, they're here. Infected have already appeared at the southeast corner. I quickly put on my clothes and grabbed my backpack. Inside were the most basic emergency items: a flashlight, a walkie-talkie, drinking water, a kitchen knife, and a few bars of chocolate. This was a habit I had developed over these past few days. Always ready to handle the worst-case scenario. How many? I asked while rushing downstairs. At least 20. Maybe more. Oscar's voice was rigid with tension. The way they're moving is very strange. It looks organized. This information made my chest tighten. Previous reports had already mentioned that the infected were evolving, demonstrating higher-level behavioral patterns. But witnessing this change with one's own eyes was still utterly terrifying. Reaching the southeast corner of the complex, the sky was still pitch black. Several volunteers were holding emergency floodlights, staring intently at the movement outside the perimeter wall. Under the dim lights, I saw about 30 infected individuals moving slowly, circling this area, but they didn't directly attack the perimeter wall. What are they doing? A volunteer asked in confusion. It looks like they're scouting. I carefully observed the behavioral patterns of the infected. They indeed weren't wandering aimlessly like D4, or blindly attacking. On the contrary, they moved along the edges of the wall, seemingly looking for weak spots. Every now and then, one or two would approach the wall, tentatively pushing and pulling at it. They are looking for a breach. I raised my voice. It's like they're assessing our defenses. Oscar's face was grave. That's impossible. The infected shouldn't have that kind of intelligence. Maybe it's not intelligence, but an evolutionary instinct. I answered, my mind rapidly analyzing the various possibilities. Just like ants don't need to think individually to display complex behaviors as a swarm. Whatever the reason was, one fact had become clear. What we were facing was no longer those unorganized, individual infected from the early stages, but a threatening horde with some kind of collective, behavioral pattern. This made our situation far more dangerous. Tell everyone to reinforce the defenses, I told Oscar, especially the weak links of the perimeter wall. We need more hands and materials. Over the next 2 hours, the entire complex fell into a frantic state of combat readiness. Every single resident staying behind was assigned a task. Some were responsible for reinforcing the wall. Some prepared rudimentary weapons, while others set up observation posts to closely monitor the movements of the infected. Jerry mobilized all available construction materials within the complex: cement bags, steel bars, wooden planks, and even furniture and appliances. As long as it could increase the sturdiness of the defensive line, it was put to use. Dr. Chan, meanwhile, set up a makeshift medical station in the recreation room at the center of the complex, preparing to handle potential casualties. His assistants, a few residents with nursing experience, were inventorying medications and preparing sterilization equipment. At 6 o'clock in the morning, as the first ray of sunlight illuminated the east, we finally completed our basic defensive preparations. The main weak points of the wall were reinforced. Rudimentary watchtowers were built at a few critical locations, and the necessary evacuation routes were determined and marked. However, daylight didn't bring a sense of security, but rather an even greater terror. Under the sunlight, we could finally see clearly the situation surrounding the complex. The number of infected far exceeded our imagination. It was no longer 30, but hundreds of them. They surrounded the southeast side of the complex, and their numbers were still steadily growing. What was even more unsettling was that within the horde of infected, a few noticeably different individuals appeared. They were taller and larger than ordinary infected, moved more agilely, and seemed to be commanding the others. What are those things? Oscar pointed at those few distinct individuals, his voice trembling slightly. Evolved types. I stared at those monsters, a cold dread rising in my heart. The virus mutated inside their bodies, producing a more advanced form. Can we hold them off? Oscar asked the question that was on everyone's mind. I didn't answer immediately. As a programmer, I was used to analyzing the core of a problem and looking for the optimal solution, but the situation before us was far too complex to be assessed with simple logic. Too many unknown variables, too many uncontrollable factors. We have to hold them off, I finally said, not just for ourselves, but also for those elderly and children who chose to stay behind. Right now, we are their only hope. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the infected began their first probing attack. At first, it was just a few stray individuals slamming into the wall, which we repelled with ease. But as time went on, their attacks became more coordinated and focused. Around noon, the wall at the southeast corner was already noticeably deformed. Several support points were on the verge of collapsing. We need to evacuate the personnel from that area, I said to Jerry, who had rushed over out of breath. At the same time, prepare the second line of defense. Jerry nodded, and immediately organized a team to begin evacuating the residents from the southeast sector. Simultaneously, several volunteers inside the complex were setting up roadblocks and barriers to form an inner defensive line. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the first large-scale attack began. Dozens of infected individuals, guided by those distinct mutated types, focused their assault on a weak spot in the southeast wall. Although our volunteers resisted heroically, repelling multiple surges with iron bars and homemade spears, the wall structure was visibly shaking and wouldn't hold much longer. The volunteer in charge of the southeast defense reported over the walkie-talkie, requesting immediate reinforcements. Just as I was about to lead a team over to reinforce them, Oscar suddenly stopped me. I'll go, You need to stay at the command center to coordinate the overall defense. There was no time to argue, so I could only nod in agreement. Oscar took 5 volunteers and quickly ran toward the southeast corner, each carrying rudimentary weapons and protective gear. The next hour was the longest moment I had ever experienced. Sporadic reports kept filtering through the walkie-talkie. The wall was holding up stubbornly. The volunteers used every possible means to withstand wave after wave of attacks. But the number and coordination of the infected exceeded our expectations, and the defensive line was crumbling bit by bit. At 3:45 in the afternoon, the nightmare finally happened. The wall broke, the southeast corner wall was breached, and the infected were flooding it. Oscar's panicked voice came through the walkie-talkie, backed by a chaotic din of screams and horrific screeches. I immediately sounded the alarm through the public address system. The southeast line has fallen. Everyone retreat to the inner defensive line immediately. Repeating, the southeast line has fallen. Retreat immediately. The complex instantly fell into an organized chaos. Volunteers from each building, following the procedures from our previous drills, swiftly organized the residents to evacuate toward the center of the complex. The elderly and children were escorted first, with strong young people taking charge of their protection. Standing in the command center on the second floor of the management office, I watched all of this through the window. The southeast corner had completely fallen, and dozens of infected were flooding into the complex. Chasing after the retreating residents, Oscar and his squad were fighting a rear guard. Action to buy time for the others. Oscar, retreat immediately. I commanded over the walkie-talkie, don't stay and fight. Give me 2 more minutes. His voice was filled with grim determination. There are still a few elderly residents who haven't made it out. I clenched my teeth and waited, every single second feeling like pure torture. Finally, Oscar's voice came through the walkie-talkie again. Everyone is out. We are retreating now. But there are too many infected. We might. Before he could finish, the transmission suddenly cut off. I called out repeatedly, but only static and white noise came from the walkie-talkie. Damn it. I slammed my hand hard against the desk, but now is not the time to be emotional. I took a deep breath and turned to the leaders of the other sectors. Everyone, execute Plan B immediately. Abandon the outer areas and concentrate all forces on protecting the central zone. Plan B was the contingency plan we had previously prepared for the worst-case scenario. Abandon most areas of the complex, pulling all personnel inside, supplies, and the few high-rise buildings in the central zone, forming a small fortress. This was a choice of last resort, meaning we would lose a vast amount of space and supplies. But under the current circumstances, there was absolutely no other choice. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the complex's defensive line had shrunk to the 3 high-rise buildings in the central zone, Building 12, Building 13, and Building 14. These 3 buildings connected through the underground garage, forming a closed defensive system. All the surviving residents, about 300 people, were housed within these 3 buildings. All entrances and exits on the first 10 second floors were sealed tight, leaving only a few emergency passages, while the 3rd floor became the first true line of defense, equipped with all available weapons and defensive structures. Just as we finished our final defensive deployment, a familiar figure appeared, stumbling beneath Building 12. It was Oscar. He was covered in blood, his right arm dangling, clearly severely injured. But what was even more shocking was that he had actually managed to break out from the infected zone and return all by himself. We quickly lowered a rope ladder and pulled him up to the 3rd floor. Dr. Chong immediately began treating his wounds. Weak but lucid, Oscar reported the situation at the southeast corner to me. The infected are smarter than we think, he said, his breath faint. They'll surround people who are isolated, and they can even use simple tools. No one else made it out. I held his hand, my heart filled with guilt and grief. Those brave volunteers had sacrificed themselves to protect everyone else. As the decision-maker, could I have done better? It's not your fault. Oscar seemed to see right through my thoughts. We all knew the risks. What matters is that the majority of people are still alive. Dr. Chong finished the initial treatment and shook his head at me. The wound is deep. He needs antibiotics and professional medical care. But the biggest issue is that he might have been bitten. My heart sank. If Oscar was truly infected, given the onset speed of the virus, he would turn very soon. But I couldn't and wouldn't give up on him just like that. Keep him under close observation, I told Dr. Chong, and give him the best treatment possible. If there is any abnormality, notify me immediately. Night fell, and the 3 high-rise buildings in the central zone became isolated islands in the dark. The surrounding areas had been completely occupied by the infected. They wandered through the once familiar streets and corridors, letting out blood-curdling screeches from time to time. Standing on the roof of Building 14, I looked out at this tiny world surrounded by the infected. Not far away, in other sectors of the city, bursts of fire and explosions flashed occasionally. Clearly, fierce battles were taking place there as well. I couldn't help but think of the residents who chose to evacuate, wondering if they had safely arrived at the North District save point. Just as I was lost in thought, a little girl's voice came from behind me. Uncle Lee, are we going to die? I turned around and saw 8-year-old Chloe standing at the rooftop doorway. She was a resident from Unit 1602. Her parents had gone missing during the initial outbreak, and the neighbors had been looking after her ever since. No, we won't. I made my voice sound as firm and gentle as possible. We will get through this. Chloe walked over to my side, looking up at the starry sky. Mom and Dad said to make a wish upon a star when things get hard. Do you think the stars can hear our wishes? I looked at that night sky blanketed with stars, and suddenly remembered a saying programmers often use. In the internet age, every piece of data is logged, and every request gets a response. Maybe it's the same with the stars. It's just that the way they respond is beyond our understanding. Chloe seemed pleased with this answer. She closed her eyes and folded her hands together, whispering something in a tiny voice. Then she opened her eyes and smiled at me. I wish that Uncle Ryan and the others could return safely, but we left here. Ryan and the evacuation team. Yeah, if they successfully reached the North District safe point, maybe it really would bring rescue. But from the time they departed until now, nearly 30 hours had already passed. At a normal pace, they should have reached their destination a long time ago. Why was there still absolutely no word? After Chloe went back to the lady who was looking after her, I returned to the temporary command center in Unit 1801, Building 13. This was originally a regular family's apartment, but it had now been converted into our war room. Posted on the wall was the layout map of the complex, marking each defensive post and evacuation route. Arranged on the table were all available communication devices, including walkie-talkies, flashlights, and an old amateur ham radio. Several Corps members were waiting for me, their faces completely etched with worry. What's the supply status? I asked Mrs. Joe. Food and water can last for about a week, provided we strictly ration them. She answered, medication is on the tighter side, especially antibiotics and painkillers, which are only enough to handle small-scale injuries or illnesses. How about the defense? I turned to Jerry. Below the third floor of all 3 buildings, all entrances and exits have been sealed tight, leaving only an emergency passage in the underground garage. Defensive posts have been established on the 3rd floor, equipped with all available weapons. To be completely honest, if a massive horde of infected attacks simultaneously, it will be very difficult for us to hold out for long. How is Oscar doing? I finally asked. Dr. Chan shook his head. His injuries are very severe, and there is still a risk of infection. However, at present, no symptoms of turning have appeared. That was a good sign. The meeting lasted for about an hour. We discussed various potential scenarios and countermeasures, but everyone knew clearly in their hearts that our options were already very limited. Either hold our ground until rescue arrives, or attempt to break out before supplies are exhausted, or the defensive line collapses. Yet both of these paths were filled with the unknown and danger. Once the meeting concluded, I went back to the roof of Building 14 all by myself. It was late at night, and the infected around the complex seemed to have quieted down a lot. Only an occasional low growl broke the silence of the night. I opened my laptop. Its battery could still support a few more hours of use. Even though the network had been down for a long time, I still habitually recorded the things that happened each day, just like logging information when writing code. Maybe one day, if human civilization is rebuilt, these records can help people understand the truth behind this disaster. Just as I was tapping away on the keyboard, a faint burst of radio static caught my attention. It was that old amateur ham radio in the corner of the rooftop. Its indicator light had actually flared up. I immediately rushed over to adjust the frequency and volume. Amidst the static, a sporadic human voice gradually became clear. City S, Waterfront. Anyone there? Repeating. Are there any survivors at Waterfront Estates in City S? I grabbed the microphone in pure excitement. This is Waterfront Estates. We have over 300 survivors here. Please advise. The other side seemed very excited as well. Thank God. We are the military safe point in the North District. We received your positioning signal. Ryan and your evacuation team have arrived safely. They told us about your situation. Ryan and the others made it. I almost wanted to cheer out loud, but the next sentence from the other side caused me to instantly freeze. Listen. The situation is highly complex. 70% of the entire City S has already fallen, and the military is organizing a final clearing operation. We plan to airdrop supplies to your area tomorrow morning, and then dispatch a ground rescue team within 36 hours. But you must hold out. Do you understand? No matter what happens, you must hold your position. Understood? We will hold out until rescue arrives. I answered firmly, while doing the math in my head. 36 hours meant we had to hold on for at least another day and a half. Given our current supply and defense situation, this was a severe challenge, but at least we finally saw a glimmer of hope. The other side added a few more details, including the exact time of the airdrop and the signaling method, and then the transmission ended. One immediately gathered all the Corps members to share the good news. Ryan and the others are safe. Mrs. Joe wept tears of joy. I knew he would make it. 36 hours, Jerry mused. We need to be fully prepared. The infected could launch a new attack at any moment. I nodded. Starting now, we enter our final defensive state. Everyone must strictly stick to their assigned duties. Ration every single bit of supplies, and conserve every ounce of strength. Tomorrow morning's airdrop will be critical. We must ensure we retrieve it safely. Everyone dispersed to get ready, leaving only Dr. Chan behind. Regarding Oscar's condition, he hesitated for a moment. There have been some changes. My chest tightened. Has he started to turn? No. Quite the opposite. Dr. Chan looks slightly puzzled. His wounds are healing, and at an exceptionally fast rate. His body temperature is a little high, but he doesn't have the typical symptoms of infection. It's very strange. Logically, symptoms should appear very quickly after a bite, but I followed Dr. Chan to check on Oscar. He was lying on the bed in the temporary medical station, fast asleep. The wound on his right arm was indeed much smaller than before, but his skin carried an abnormal flush, and his breathing was faster than usual. What do you think this means? I asked Dr. Chan in a low voice. I'm not sure. He shook his head. It could be some kind of immune response. Maybe his body has elements that resist the virus. Or the virus is affecting him in a different way. I finished his sentence, a sense of unease welling up in my heart. If the virus was truly evolving and producing new modes of infection, then all our previous knowledge and preventative measures might have to be completely reevaluated. Keep observing him. I finally said, if there's any abnormality, isolate him immediately. Returning to my temporary quarters in Unit 1602, Building 14. I lay in bed but found no sleep at all. Tomorrow morning's airdrop to rescue 36 hours from now, Oscar's abnormal condition, and the steadily growing number of infected around the complex. All of it was like a set of gears, constantly spinning in my head, searching for potential connections and solutions. As a programmer, I was used to looking for patterns in chaos and extracting rules from complexity, but the situation before us seemed to exceed the scope of conventional logic. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with an algorithm, but a chaotic game of pure survival. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I was jolted awake by a commotion downstairs. Looking through the window, I saw about 50 residents gathered in the open space between the 3 buildings. They were tensely yet systematically preparing for something. It turned out the airdrop was arriving soon. According to the instructions on the radio, we needed to light signal fires in the designated area to guide the airdrop drop. But this also meant we would be exposing our position to the surrounding infected. I quickly went downstairs to join the preparations. Jerry was organizing a team to reinforce the surrounding defenses, while several volunteers were in the middle of the open space piling up flammable materials, ready to light them the moment they received the signal. Everyone stay alert. I reminded them, once the airdrop begins, the infected will likely be drawn over here. We must complete the retrieval process quickly and safely. At 3:45, a signal came over the radio. Airdrop in preparation. Execution in 10 minutes. Please light the signal fires. We immediately lit the signal fires. The flames danced in the darkness, illuminating the surrounding buildings and our faces. Everyone tensely watched the night sky, waiting for rescue to arrive. Sure enough, in less than 5 minutes, a commotion from the infected could be heard on the outskirts of the complex. Drawn by the fires and the activity, they began moving toward the central zone. Our defensive personnel immediately went on high alert, holding their weapons and guarding every possible entrance. At 3:55, the roar of a helicopter echoed from a distance. As the sound grew closer, we finally saw it. A black helicopter bearing military insignia. It was flying very low, seemingly confirming our location. Then, several large crates were dropped from the helicopter, their parachutes deploying in the night sky, slowly drifting down toward our open lot. At the same time, the helicopter began to circle, sweeping its powerful searchlight across the surrounding area, temporarily dispersing the approaching infected. Go gather the airdrop. I ordered the defense team to maintain their guard. Several volunteers swiftly rushed toward the landed crates and dragged them back to the central zone. Under the cover of the helicopter's searchlight, the entire process went very smoothly, with almost no infected breaking through our defensive line. When the helicopter finally departed, we quickly extinguished the signal fires and began inventorying the airdrop supplies, food, medicine, communication equipment, and even some weapons and ammunition. These supplies were enough to sustain us through the next 36 hours, while we waited for the ground rescue team to arrive. However, just as we were breathing a sigh of relief, a sharp scream came from Building 14, followed by a chaotic din of shouting. Infected. There are infected on the 3rd floor of Building 14. My heart dropped straight to the bottom in an instant. The 3rd floor was our first line of defense. If it was breached, our entire defensive system would collapse. I immediately took a few armed volunteers and rushed down to Building 14. The elevators had long been disabled, so we could only take the stairs up to the 3rd floor. When we arrived, the scene before us was shocking. Oscar was standing in the middle of the hallway, his entire body trembling, his eyes completely bloodshot. Around him, 2 guards lay on the ground, completely motionless. What was even more terrifying was that the window at the end of the hallway had been shattered, and several infected were trying to crawl inside. Oscar, I shouted, unable to believe the sight before my eyes. What did you do? He turned toward me, a light gleaming in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was neither the clarity of a normal person, nor the chaos of an infected individual, but a calculating detachment that sat between the two. They are calling out to me. His voice was hoarse and distorted. I can hear their voices. I must let them in. I raised my weapon, my heart filled with grief and hesitation. Oscar was my friend, a comrade who had fought by my side all these days. But right now, he was no longer the person I knew. Oscar, if you still have a single shred of sanity left, Step back. My voice trembled with intense emotion. I don't want to hurt you. He tilted his head, looking at me, a bizarre smile surfacing on his face. Leo, you're far too naive. You honestly think this is just a disaster? This is an evolution. No. This is an evolution. We are changing into a superior species. As he spoke, he suddenly lunged at me with astonishing speed. I fired instinctively. The bullet struck him in the shoulder, but he didn't seem to feel any pain, continuing to charge forward. Right at the exact moment he was about to pounce on me, the volunteers behind me opened fire. After a succession of gunshots, Oscar finally collapsed, yet his eyes remained wide open. That bizarre smile still hanging on the corners of his mouth blocked the window. I snapped out of it, shouting to the volunteers, "We can't let the infected inside." Everyone swung into action right away, using furniture and wooden planks to block the shattered window, preventing more infected from crawling in. At the same time, I knelt down to check Oscar's condition. He no longer showed any vital signs, but his physical state was baffling. His wounds were almost completely healed. His skin surface was covered in a strange thin film, and his blood had turned an abnormal deep crimson. This was completely unlike any symptom of infection we had encountered before. Take him to the medical station, I told the volunteers. Handle him with extreme caution, and wear full protective gear the entire time. After handling the sudden emergency on the 3rd floor, I returned to the command center. Dr. Chong was waiting for me, his expression incredibly grave. I heard about what just happened. He said in a low voice, "I am so sorry for failing to discover Oscar's abnormality in time. It's not your fault." I shook my head. None of us have any experience with this new mode of infection. The issue is, Dr. Chong said with deep concern, if Oscar could be infected and turn without showing any obvious symptoms, then there might be others among us in a similar state. This possibility felt like a bucket of ice water dumped straight over my head. If hidden infected individuals are truly mixed in among us, then no matter how airtight our defenses are, we could be breached from the inside. We need a way to identify this latent infection. I pondered. Did Oscar exhibit anything unusual before he turned? His body temperature was slightly elevated, his wounds healed abnormally fast, and Dr. Chan recalled. He mentioned he could hear voices, like some kind of calling. Something suddenly clicked in my mind. He started acting unusual right before the airdrop arrived. Correct, Dr. Chong nodded. Indeed. He began showing clear restlessness and auditory hallucinations last night. This specific timing was critical. Could it be the sound of the helicopter? Or some other kind of stimulus that triggered the final turn of the virus inside Oscar's body? If that was the case, then over the next 36 hours, as the rescue team gradually approaches, more latent infected individuals might be activated. We need to step up internal precautions. I decided. Starting right now, establish an isolation and observation zone in each building. Anyone exhibiting abnormal symptoms, no matter how mild, must undergo screening. At the same time, reinforce our shift system to ensure every critical post is monitored by multiple people, preventing a single infected person from causing a breach. Dr. Chan expressed his agreement and immediately set to work preparing the relevant measures. I, meanwhile, went back to the roof to report the latest situation via radio to the North District Safe Point, focusing specifically on the discovery of this new mode of infection seen in Oscar. This aligns perfectly with what we've observed on our end. The other side responded. The virus is indeed evolving, producing far more complex infection patterns. We have already reported this information to the military's Scientific Research Division. They are stepping up their efforts to find countermeasures. How much longer until the ground rescue team can be dispatched? I asked urgently. The plan is 36 hours. But considering the new developments, we will try to arrive ahead of schedule, stay alert, and be ready to evacuate at any moment. Once the communication ended, I stood on the roof, watching the dawn light gradually illuminating the east. A new day was beginning, but the challenges we faced were far more severe than yesterday. Not only did we have to defend against external attacks from the infected, but we also had to stay vigilant against potential latent infections from within. Meanwhile, rescue was still 36 hours away. I took a deep breath and turned toward the stairs. No matter how difficult the road ahead might be, we had no choice but to keep moving forward, because on this isolated island surrounded by the infected, we had nothing to rely on except each other. The second day after the breakout and airdrop incident, the 3 buildings in the central zone of the complex had been transformed into a true fortress. All windows on the 1st and 2nd floors were sealed tight with steel plates and furniture, leaving only a few hidden observation slits. A complete defensive line was established on the 3rd floor, equipped with the weapons and ammunition obtained from the airdrop. The passages between floors were strictly controlled, with at least 2 volunteers guarding each entry and exit point. Most importantly, we established a strict biological contamination screening mechanism, conducting a full-body check on all residents every 4 hours. Oscar's incident had served as a wake-up call for everyone. The enemy might already be among us. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I was in the temporary command center on the top floor of Building 14. Reviewing the defense deployment map, Jerry came over in a rush. In Building 12, we found 2 suspicious cases of infection. They are showing symptoms similar to Oscar's, slightly elevated body temperatures, abnormal behavior, and they claim they can hear a calling. I immediately put down the work in my hands. Have they been isolated yet? It's underway, but the residents of Building 12 are being somewhat resistant. They think we're overreacting and are unwilling to see their family members forcibly isolated. I followed Jerry and rushed over to Building 12. Along the way, I noticed that the atmosphere inside the complex was even more tense than the day before. People were moving in a frantic hurry, keeping their distance from one another, their eyes filled with vigilance and fear. Oscar's turn had planted a terrifying seed in the hearts of the survivors. Anyone, including those closest to you, could unknowingly become a threat. When we arrived at Building 12, the situation was already getting a bit out of hand. Over a dozen residents had gathered in the third-floor hallway, currently in a heated dispute with the quarantine volunteers. The focus of the argument was the two isolated residents, a middle-aged couple. They were locked inside a room that had been temporarily converted into a quarantine cell, constantly shouting something through the door. They just have a common cold. What right do you have to lock them up? A young woman questioned frantically. She was the daughter of the quarantine couple. Rules are rules. Anyone who exhibits suspicious symptoms must be put into the holding room until they are confirmed safe. A volunteer answered seriously. This is for everyone's safety. The argument grew increasingly heated, looking like it was about to turn into a physical altercation. I quickly stepped forward and signaled both sides to calm down. Everyone, please don't panic, I said in a tone as calm as possible. This is merely a precautionary measure. It doesn't mean they are definitely infected. If the observation period ends and there are no signs of a turn, they can go home, but they don't have any wounds on them at all. The daughter still wouldn't let it go. My mom is just frightened. She doesn't even have a scratch on her. How could she possibly mutate? I understood her anxiety, but under the current circumstances, we couldn't take any risks. Oscar's case had already proven that this damn virus seemed to be evolving. Even without any obvious external trauma, as long as there was contact with infected blood or bodily fluids, it could potentially cause a latent infection. I understand your worry, I said softly, but please think about Oscar's situation. If we had been more vigilant back then, maybe we could have avoided the damage to Building 14 and the resulting casualties. Right now, we cannot afford to make the same mistake. At the mention of Oscar, the tension in the crowd eased somewhat. That bitter lesson was still fresh in everyone's heart. Then at least let me stay with them, the daughter pleaded. I can't let them face this all alone. This was a difficult dilemma. From a humanitarian standpoint, those who are sick certainly need the company of loved ones, but from a defensive standpoint, this increased the risk of cross-infection. I thought for a moment and proposed a compromise. You can communicate with them through the window, but no direct physical contact. At the same time, you'll also need to undergo screening twice a day. If any abnormal symptoms appear, you must report them immediately. Although the daughter wasn't satisfied, she had no choice but to accept this plan. The crowd gradually dispersed, but this minor confrontation served as a wake-up call for me. As time went on and the pressure mounted, the trust and solidarity among people were being eroded. If the situation continued to deteriorate, we might face not only the external threat of the infected, but internal division and chaos as well. Returning to the command center, I gathered the core team members to discuss how to maintain community cohesion while ensuring safety. We need more transparent information sharing, Mrs. Zhou suggested. People fear the unknown. If they understand why we are making certain decisions, it will be much easier for them to accept. At the same time, increase positive community activities, Dr. Chong added. Even under quarantine conditions, we can still organize some safe interactions, like singing competitions between floors, children's story hours, and so on, helping people maintain hope and vitality. These suggestions were highly valuable. After some discussion, we formulated a more comprehensive community management plan, hoping to look after people's psychological needs while remaining on high alert. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the radio crackled to life once more. It was the liaison officer from the North District Safe Point. Waterfront Estates, come in please. We have a critical update to broadcast. I responded immediately. This is Waterfront Estates. Go ahead. The plan has changed. The liaison officer's voice carried a distinct sense of urgency. A large-scale outbreak has occurred at the North District Safe Point. We are forced to evacuate our current position. The rescue plan is temporarily on hold. This news felt like a bucket of ice water dumped straight over my head. The North District Safe Point was the largest sanctuary established by the military in City S. If even that place had fallen, then the entire city was practically lost. What about Ryan and the others? I asked urgently. Are they safe? The majority of the people have already evacuated with the military, but the process was chaotic. Some people were separated. The liaison officer paused for a moment. We are currently trying to re-establish contact. For now, you must hold your ground on your own until a new rescue plan is formulated. How much longer can we hold out? I couldn't help but ask this heavy question. The liaison officer was silent for a few seconds. To be completely frank, the situation is not optimistic. The infection across all of City S is spreading at an accelerated pace, especially that new strain of latent infection. The military is considering a final clearance protocol. A final clearance protocol. Behind this vague phrase lay a truly terrifying implication. I didn't dare think about it too deeply. How much time do we have left? I pressed further. 72 hours, at most. After that, the liaison officer didn't finish his sentence, but the meaning was already crystal clear. After 72 hours, there might not be any rescue coming at all. Once the transmission ended, I stood on the roof, looking out at the city skyline in the distance. The smoke from fires was rising everywhere, obscuring the sky. Black smoke was rising from several areas, and sporadic sounds of explosions and gunfire drifted over from time to time. This once bustling city was dying bit by bit. And as for us, we were like a swarm of ants trapped in this dead city, desperately searching for a way out. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the court team gathered once again to discuss the latest shift in the situation. The cancellation of the rescue plan means we can only rely on ourselves now. Jerry said directly and straightforwardly. Our existing supplies can last for 5 days at most, after which we will face a severe shortage. The biggest threat is those latent infected individuals, Dr. Chan said with deep concern. Today, 3 more suspicious cases were discovered, all exhibiting similar symptoms, a slight fever, abnormal behavior, and claiming they can hear a calling. How much longer can we hold out? Mrs. Zhou voiced the question that was on everyone's mind. I looked at the map, weighing the various possibilities in my mind. Given our current defensive state and the onset of the infection, the central zone of the complex could hold out for 3 to 4 days at most. But if a large-scale, concentrated turn of latent infected individuals occurs, we might not even survive 24 hours. Silence blanketed the meeting room. Everyone understood that we were facing a brutal reality. Even if we did our absolute best, this place would very likely become our grave. In that case, should we consider an evacuation? Jerry raised the question cautiously. I had been thinking about it all afternoon. Staying behind to defend meant facing the risk of running out of supplies and a total collapse of our defensive line. Evacuating, on the other hand, meant traversing an urban area crawling with the infected to reach a safe zone that might already cease to exist. Both paths were fraught with danger, but at least evacuating preserved a sliver of hope. I believe evacuation is our only choice. I finally said, but we won't blindly rush toward the North District. Instead, we'll head to the West Mountain area on the edge of the city. I pointed to a spot on the map. There is a forestry station here. The terrain is elevated, the surrounding population is sparse, and the risk of infection is relatively low. If we can make it there, we can temporarily avoid the massive infections in the city and wait for further rescue. The West Mountain area is at least 25 kilometers away from here. Jerry frowned. Traveling on foot will take a whole day. Along the way, we'll have to cross multiple zones that have likely already fallen. Furthermore, we have over 300 people, including the elderly and children. Mrs. Zhou said with anxiety. An evacuation on such a massive scale is virtually impossible to pull off without drawing the attention of the infected. These are all valid concerns, but compared to staying in the complex and waiting to die, I prefer to actively seek a chance at life. We can evacuate in separate groups. I explained my plan. Maintain a distance between groups, while keeping in contact to back each other up. The vulnerable will be escorted by those who are strong and fit. Each group will be equipped with sufficient communication and defensive gear. We'll take the forest trails instead of the main roads, avoiding known infected zones as much as possible. After a heated discussion, the team ultimately agreed to the evacuation proposal, but decided to conduct a small-scale reconnaissance first. I would lead a 5-person squad to move about 5 kilometers along the designated route, confirming the road conditions and safety status, and then return to report. If the reconnaissance goes smoothly, the main body will begin the evacuation within 48 hours. Once the meeting ended, I started organizing the scouting team. The team included myself, 2 young men with outdoor experience, a military veteran, and a taxi driver who was highly familiar with the terrain of City S. We chose the lightest gear possible: backpacks, drinking water, dry rations, flashlights, and rudimentary weapons to ensure mobility. For communications, we brought along walkie-talkies and a portable radio. We could maintain contact with the complex, but considering the battery life and signal range, communication was expected to last for only about 6 hours. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the 5 of us gathered at the complex's east gate, ready to set out. The night was our ally, providing a degree of cover for our movements. The weather was gloomy, with no moonlight. Although this increased the difficulty of marching, it also reduced the risk of being spotted. Before leaving, I briefly gave some instructions to the core members staying behind, and then shook hands with each person to say goodbye. If we haven't returned after 36 hours, evacuate according to the original plan. I told Jerry, don't wait for us. Before setting out, I went up to the roof, one last time to look down at this neighborhood that had become my home. Even though I had lived here for only 5 years, it held too many memories from the excitement when I first started my job, to the mundane day-to-day life, and then to this solidarity and struggle amidst the apocalypse. No matter the outcome, this experience will be forever etched in my heart. We chose to set out from the northeast corner of the complex, where the perimeter wall was lower and there were relatively fewer infected nearby. Under the cover provided by the volunteers, we scaled the wall one by one and silently slipped into the darkness. At night, the city took on an eerie silence, devoid of traffic and human voices. There was only the wind blowing through the abandoned structures, occasionally mixed with distant cries of what could be man or beast. We followed our pre-planned route, trying our best to avoid open areas and potential clusters of infected, maintaining a fast, yet quiet pace. The first 2 kilometers of the journey went relatively smoothly. We crossed a few empty streets and a small park, encountering only a handful of scattered, infected individuals, all of whom we successfully avoid. This area of the city seemed to have been completely abandoned by both the infected and humans, leaving behind nothing but a dead silence. But as we approached the city center, the situation began to get complicated. At an intersection, we encountered our first true crisis. About 20 infected individuals were wandering around an overturned truck. Their behavioral pattern was different from what we had seen before. They seemed more purposeful, stopping from time to time to listen for something. We hid in the shadow of a building to observe this group of infected. "What are they doing?" asked Vincent, the veteran in the squad. "It looks like they're patrolling," the taxi driver answered. "I've driven on this road countless times in the past, but I've never seen anything like this." I carefully observed the behavior of the infected, and suddenly realized something. They aren't patrolling, they are waiting. Waiting for what? It was uncertain, but judging by their stance and the direction of their focus, it seemed like they were guarding something, or expecting something to pass through here. This discovery put us even more on guard. If the infected had evolved to the point of being able to set up ambushes, then our original evacuation route might face a much greater risk than imagined. After a brief discussion, we decided to take a detour. Although this would increase the travel distance, safety came first. During the detour, we were forced to cut through an abandoned shopping mall. This once bustling mall was now in complete disarray. The shops had been looted clean, and the floors were littered with trash and dried bloodstains. Just as we were cautiously making our way through a clothing store, we suddenly heard a faint metallic clinking sound. We instantly became alert, raising our weapons and forming a defensive circle to guard against a potential attack. The sound came from deep within the mall. It seemed as if someone or something was moving. In an apocalyptic environment, any unusual sound could mean danger. "Who's going to check it out?" the veteran whispered. "I'll go," I volunteered. "Keep watch here. If I'm not back within 5 minutes, proceed forward according to the original plan." I tiptoed toward the source of the sound, gripping a military dagger in my hand, one of the items from the airdrop supplies. The inside of the mall was dark and damp, and the air was thick with a musty odor and an indescribable scent of decay. The sound grew clearer and clearer. It seemed to be coming from the back room of a small supermarket. I held my breath and slowly pushed open the half-ajar door, the beam of my flashlight sweeping across the piled-up shelves and boxes. Right at that moment, a tiny silhouette darted out from behind the boxes. I instinctively raised my dagger, but at the very last second, I recognized that it was a child. It was a little boy of about 10 years old, his filthy face completely etched with terror. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." I immediately lowered my weapon, making my voice sound as gentle as possible. "Are you all alone here?" The boy looked at me warily, then nodded, and then shook his head, as if hesitating over whether to tell the truth. "We are from waterfront estates, and we're looking for a safe evacuation route," I explained, hoping to gain his trust. "What's your name?" The boy finally spoke, his voice somewhat hoarse from not talking for a long time. "Leo. My mom and I have been hiding here, but 3 days ago, she went out to look for food and never came back." My heart sank, knowing exactly what that implied. In this peril-filled world, the chances of a person surviving out there alone were extremely slim. "Would you like to come with us?" I asked gently. "We have food and water, and we're heading to a safer place." Leo hesitated for a moment, and then nodded his head. He led me back to his home, a small cubicle in the back room of the supermarket, where cardboard and clothes were spread out, and a few empty water bottles and food wrappers sat in the corner. "Let me pack up," he said, and began stuffing a few personal items into a small backpack, including a worn-out comic book and a very old-looking gaming console. These innocent items seemed so out of place in the current environment, yet so precious. They were this child's last connection to the normal world. When I brought Leo back to the squad, everyone showed surprised expressions, but no one raised an objection. In this cruel world, every single life is worth cherishing and protecting. With Leo's addition, we had no choice but to adjust our march plan. On one hand, we needed to look after his stamina and safety. On the other hand, his familiarity with the mall and its surrounding areas was unexpectedly high, providing a lot of valuable information. "You can't take that road," he said, pointing to the route we had originally planned. "There are a lot of monsters there, and they've become smarter lately. They hide in the dark to ambush people." "How do you know that?" the veteran asked. "I saw it from up high," Leo explained. "My mom wouldn't let me go out, but I often climbed onto the roof to watch. One time I saw a group of monsters." The boy suddenly stopped talking, his body trembling violently as if remembering a terrifying scene. "A group of people wanted to escape along that road, but they were all caught by the ambushing monsters." This information was unsettling, but of critical importance to us. If we had proceeded according to the original plan, we would have walked straight into an ambush by the infected. Guided by young Leo, we switched to a more roundabout but relatively safe route by using the connecting walkways of several commercial buildings and the underground parking lots. We avoided the main streets. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we reached our first plant. Major milestone, City's 4th High School. This school, located on the edge of the urban area, is a necessary path to the West Mountain area. According to the original plan, we would take a brief rest here before continuing forward. The school's main gates were locked tight, but a section of the perimeter wall had collapsed, forming a small breach. We easily scaled the wall and entered the campus. The sports field was white and silent. The windows of the classroom building were mostly shattered, casting eerie shadows under the moonlight. This place looks like it's been abandoned, the taxi driver remarked. Let's hope there are no uninvited guests. We decided to take a brief rest in a classroom on the first floor of the building. This position provided both cover and an easy view of the outside situation. Most importantly, it offered multiple escape routes. After entering the classroom, we cleared a small space and laid down the simple sleeping pads we had brought in our backpacks. Leo quickly fell asleep in the corner. It looked like he hadn't had a peaceful night's sleep in a very long time. The veteran and I took turns keeping watch, using the radio to maintain contact with the complex, reporting our position and findings. So far, the route is relatively safe. I reported to Jerry, but the behavior patterns of the infected have changed. They are starting to show tactical planning and ambush capabilities. I recommend revising the original evacuation route to avoid main roads and open areas. Jerry confirmed the information from the other end. Understood. Things on our side are fairly stable for now. But 2 more people in the isolation zone are showing suspicious symptoms. Time is running out. When will you be back? Before tomorrow evening, we will explore as much of the route ahead as possible to ensure the main body has detailed navigation data, and they evacuate. After the transmission ended, I leaned against the window, staring out into the night. Even though I was utterly exhausted, my mind was still racing at high speed, analyzing every possible scenario and countermeasure. As a programmer, I am used to looking for patterns and solutions within complex problems. Right now, I am applying this mindset to survival, the most fundamental program of all. At dawn, we continue forward. After a night of rest, Leo's spirits were much better, and he even began to actively describe the surrounding environment and the information he knew. People often go to that gas station ahead to look for gasoline. He pointed toward a distant billboard and said, but it's very dangerous there because the nose will draw the monsters. Do you know anything about the situation in the West Mountain area? I asked. Does anyone live there? Leo shook his head. I'm not really sure. Mom said the mountain is safer, but the road is very hard to travel, which is why we never went. We continued marching along our planned route for about 2 hours before we encountered our first major obstacle. The main road to the West Mountain area was blocked by a massive car accident scene. Dozens of vehicles had collided with one another, forming a metal labyrinth that was virtually impassable. What was even worse, this area clearly bore traces of activity from the infected. Fresh bloodstains on the ground, shredded clothing, and low growls that echoed from time to time from between the vehicles. We need to find another way, the veteran said firmly. Cutting through here is too dangerous. I checked the map to look for potential alternative routes. Right. At that moment, Leo gently tugged at my sleeve. I know a path. He lowered his voice and said, we can bypass this area through the neighborhood over there. Mom took me through it once. Under Leo's guidance, we advanced along a small trail that was almost entirely overgrown with weeds, cutting through an abandoned residential neighborhood. Ultimately, we successfully bypassed the accident scene and returned to the road leading to the West Mountain area. Although this detour added about an hour to the journey, it prevented a potential dangerous encounter, proving to be a wise move. At noon, we finally reached the furthest point of our plan, which was an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. From here onward was the mountain road leading to the West Mountain area. The trees along the path were dense, and visibility was limited, making it unsuitable for a lightly equipped scouting squad to explore. According to the original plan, we would turn around and head back from here. But after this journey of exploration, I realized the evacuation route was far more complex than anticipated. Relying solely on verbal descriptions and simple maps made it hard to guarantee the main body's safe passage, especially considering the shifting behavioral patterns of the infected and the uncertainty of road conditions. After a brief discussion, we made a critical decision. Leo and I would return to the complex to assist the main body's evacuation, while the other 3 individuals would proceed to the West Mountain Forestry Station to confirm it was safe, and attempt to establish some kind of visual signal to guide the subsequent evacuees. This decision was fraught with risk, but given the urgency of time and the importance of information, it was perhaps the most rational choice. Before parting ways, we shared all the gathered intelligence and observations. 3 days from now, in the evening, we will light a signal fire at the forestry station, the veteran said. If you see a red fire, it means it's safe. If it's green, it means there is danger and you need to change your route. I nodded. If everything goes smoothly, we will arrive on the evening of the 4th day. If nobody arrives by the 5th day, we will wait until the 7th day, he said firmly. After that, we will act according to our own situations, just like that. We split into two groups and embarked on different journeys. Leo chose to return with me, which left me both moved and worried. Moved by his trust, worried about whether bringing him back to a complex that had already begun to unravel was a wise move. But in this world, every decision is filled with uncertainty. All we can do is act according to our best judgment, and then pray that luck is on our side. The return trip was much smoother than the journey out. Armed with our prior experience and Leo's guidance, we successfully avoided several dangerous zones, choosing a more hidden and secure route. By evening, we arrived once again outside the perimeter wall of waterfront estates. I contacted the complex via radio, and in less than 10 minutes, volunteers came out to meet us, helping us return safely. The situation inside the complex had deteriorated slightly since I left. Several more residents had shown suspicious symptoms and were placed in the isolation zone for observation. Supplies were being consumed faster than expected, partly due to waste caused by high tension. What was most concerning was that the number of infected around the perimeter of the complex had increased noticeably, especially at the southeast corner, which had practically formed a small gathering zone. But the good news was that the court team had basically completed the evacuation preparations, including route planning, supply allocation, and personnel grouping. Armed with the first-hand intelligence I brought back, these plans could be further refined and optimized. Given the current situation, tomorrow evening we must set out immediately, Jerry said, after listening to my report. If we delay any longer, we might not even have a chance to break out. Dr. Chang nodded. The situation in the isolation zone is not optimistic either. There are already signs showing that the virus is accelerating its evolution, and the incubation period may shorten further. We must leave before a large-scale turn occurs. After a heated discussion, we finalized the ultimate version of the evacuation plan. Tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, when the activity of most infected individuals subsides, we will break out in 3 groups from different directions of the complex, and then meet at the designated location to head to the West Mountain area together. Each group will be equipped with ample supplies, weapons, and communication devices, led by experienced volunteers. The particularly vulnerable groups, the elderly, children, and the sick, will be concentrated in the middle group to receive the tightest protection, while the young adults in the best physical shape will be distributed at the front and back to handle scouting and rearguard duties. Once the plan was drawn up, we began our final preparations, checking gear, allocating supplies, confirming the route, and emergency contingency plans. Everyone participating in the evacuation underwent basic training to understand fundamental safety rules and how to respond in emergency situations. I was assigned to the first group, responsible for clearing the path and scouting. Leo insisted on following me, even though I advised him to stay in the safer middle group. I know the way, he said stubbornly, and I'm very light. I won't be a burden to you. Considering his familiarity with the surrounding environment, it truly was a valuable resource. I ultimately agreed to his request but required him to strictly follow all safety instructions. At night, I returned to my temporary quarters and tried to get some rest to build up my strength for tomorrow's challenges. But sleep was slow to come, my mind filled with various potential scenarios and countermeasures. I opened my computer and checked the evacuation route map once more, marking all known danger points and shelters. Although the battery power was already low, I still couldn't resist writing down some thoughts, just as I had been doing over the past few days. February 2nd, 2023. Our last night at Waterfront Estates. Tomorrow we will leave this temporary refuge and embark on an unknown journey. I don't know how many people will be able to reach our destination safely, nor do I know if the destination is as safe as we hope it is. But the only thing that is certain is that staying behind will mean a slow and certain death. If anyone reads these words in the future, please remember that in this disaster, humanity showed its most terrifying side, but it also displayed the most noble courage and solidarity. No matter the outcome, this experience is worth being recorded and remembered. Leo, an ordinary programmer. A log of accidentally becoming a leader in the apocalypse. Closing the computer, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind filled with a myriad of thoughts. At this time tomorrow, we might already be at the forestry station in the West Mountain area, starting a new life. Or we might be scattered across various corners of the city, struggling to survive. Or perhaps, we might have already become one of those monsters who have lost their humanity. The future was filled with uncertainty, but at this moment, we still have hope. We still have each other, and we still have the determination to fight for survival. This is perhaps the most precious asset in the apocalypse. The final day before the evacuation, the entire complex was shrouded in a strange, tense atmosphere. Everyone was busy with their final preparation work, checking gear, packing supplies, memorizing the route, and even practicing how to walk quietly and quickly. But beneath these busy appearances lay a fear and anxiety that could not be concealed. After all, for most people, the world outside the complex had turned into a land filled with the unknown and danger. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I called one last general meeting at the command center to confirm all the details. The over 300 residents had been divided into 3 major groups, with about 100 people in each group, led by experienced volunteers. Within each major group, They were further subdivided into several 10-person squads. To ensure flexibility in responding to emergency situations, the first group will set out from the northwest corner. I said, pointing at the map. Advance along this route, avoiding main roads and open areas. Try your best to utilize buildings and terrain for cover. The second group will set out from the southwest corner, primarily responsible for transporting supplies and escorting the elderly, children, and other special vulnerable groups. The third group will set out from the northeast corner. The route is the longest but relatively secure, mainly taking on the rearguard and support responsibilities. Each group leader carefully recorded their tasks and responsibilities, raising questions and confirming details. Even though we had discussed this plan repeatedly before actually executing it, everyone wanted to make absolutely sure that nothing would go wrong. So as we neared the end of the meeting, a sharp question was raised. What if someone starts showing symptoms of infection on the road? The room instantly fell silent. This was the dilemma we had been avoiding. During the evacuation, anyone could turn into an infected individual at any moment, and a single infected person is enough to jeopardize the safety of the entire team. I took a deep breath to face this brutal question directly. Anyone who exhibits clear symptoms of infection must be isolated immediately. The squad leader will decide how to handle it from there. They can choose to leave someone behind to watch over them, or take more extreme measures. But no matter what, we cannot let one person's infection endanger the safety of the entire team. Although the wording was subtle, everyone understood exactly what I meant. In this brutal new world, sometimes the most humane choice is the hardest decision to make. After the meeting ended, I went to check on the situation in the isolation zone. Currently, 17 people were isolated due to suspicious symptoms, 5 of whom had already begun showing clear early signs of turning, abnormally high body temperatures, persistent auditory hallucinations, and impulsive behavior. How are they doing? I asked Dr. Chan. It's not looking good. He shook his head. The virus seems to be accelerating its evolution. The turning process is faster than before. If it keeps going like this, they will completely lose their minds within 12 hours at most. This piece of news made the urgency of the evacuation plan even more pronounced. We had to leave before a large-scale turn occurred. Otherwise, we might not even have a chance to break out. Do they know about their own condition? I asked in a low voice. Dr. Chan nodded. Most of them understand. They wish to leave before they fully turn. I understood what he meant. These patients who were about to turn wanted to leave this world as human beings while they still retained their humanity, rather than turning into those mindless monsters. Give them the best care possible, I said, my voice choking up a bit. If they make a decision, respect their choice. Leaving the isolation zone, I went to the temporary daycare center in the complex. Over a dozen children who had lost their parents were housed there, including Leo, whom we had found at the mall. The children were packing their small backpacks. Each person could only bring their most important belongings. Seeing me come in, Leo immediately ran over, a rare look of excitement on his face. Uncle Lee, are we really going to the mountain tonight? I knelt down and looked him straight in the eyes. Yes, but the road might be a little difficult. Are you scared? Leo shook his head. A little bit, but I don't want to be left behind alone. You won't be alone. I promise softly. I'll take care of you. Everyone will take care of each other. Okay. He nodded, then pulled a small object out of his pocket and handed it to me. It was a crude, handmade necklace, made of string and a few plastic beads of different colors. I made this, he said a bit shyly. Mom said amulets can protect people. This is for you, Uncle, to protect you and protect me. This simple gift brought a wave of warmth to my heart. In this world filled with fear and despair, a child's innocence and hope were like a sliver of light in the darkness, reminding us why we had to keep fighting and keep surviving. I took the necklace and carefully put it around my neck. Thank you, Leo. This will be my most precious amulet. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky suddenly darkened, dark clouds gathered, and a suffocating atmosphere filled the air, seemingly presaging the arrival of a storm. This turn in the weather made me a bit worried. A rainy day would make marching more difficult, but it could also provide a degree of cover for our movements, and reduce the risk of being spotted by the infected. After a brief discussion, we decided to stick to the original plan. The final countdown to the evacuation had begun. We decided not to change the plan, and to evacuate at the originally scheduled time. At 6 o'clock in the evening, I went up to the roof, looking down at this former home one last time. The neighborhood in the twilight appeared exceptionally tranquil, as if the apocalypse had never descended at all. In the distance, the city's skyline was looming under the gloomy sky, with an occasional roar of a helicopter drifting over, breaking this illusion of peace. What are you thinking about? Jerry's voice came from behind me, just wondering what I would be doing right now if this disaster hadn't happened. To be completely frank, I'd probably be rushing a project at the company, or watching a movie at home, or grabbing dinner with friends. Those little things that used to be taken for granted seem so incredibly precious now. Jerry leaned against the railing, looking out into the distance with me. People only know how to cherish things after they lose them, but the world is changing, and so are we. Maybe there will be a new normal in the future, waiting for us to cherish. This sort of simple philosophy felt exceptionally powerful in our current environment. Yes, the world had changed, but humanity's adaptability and capacity for rebuilding are astonishing. As long as we are alive, there is hope to create a new life. A new normal. At 9 o'clock in the evening, all the residents participating in the evacuation gathered in the central zone of the complex. For a final lineup and inspection, everyone carried a streamlined pack, their faces etched with a mix of tension and anticipation. The children were instructed to remain quiet, while the elderly received special care and support. As the leader of the first group, I checked the gear and communication equipment one last time. My squad consisted of 10 people, including 2 young men with outdoor experience, a retired security guard, several healthy middle-aged individuals, and Leo, who stubbornly insisted on following me. Listen up, everyone, I said to the squad members in a low voice. Once we set out, we must strictly follow our previous training, maintain absolute silence, keep close to the line, and follow commands. If we encounter danger, don't panic. Act according to our contingency plans. Remember, our objective is the forestry station in the West Mountain area. Our companions are waiting for us there. The squad members nodded solemnly. Through these days of training and preparation, everyone had grown from their initial state of panic into relatively calm and resolute survivors. 5 minutes left. Jerry checked his watch. Confirm all communication equipment. We checked the walkie-talkies and several hand-cranked radios to ensure we could maintain contact during the evacuation. Though battery life was limited, it would at least provide necessary communication. At critical moments, everything was set. I reported to Jerry that the first group was ready to move. Right at that moment, a bolt of lightning suddenly cut across the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. The storm had finally arrived. Heavy raindrops slammed against the ground, turning into a torrential downpour in the blink of an eye. This is a good omen. The retired security guard said optimistically. The rain will mask our movements, and the water will wash away our scent, reducing the risk of being spotted. I hoped he was right, but intuition told me that this sudden storm might bring more than just assistance. It could also mean far greater challenges. Proceed as planned. I finally decided. The first group prepared to set out. Under the cover of the volunteers, I led the first group and quietly moved toward the northwest corner. The torrential rain became our best cover, blurring visibility and drowning out the sound of our footsteps. The perimeter wall had long been pre-marked by us, indicating the easiest spots to climb. I scaled the wall first to confirm that the outside was temporarily clear. All clear. Start climbing. I signaled to the squad members behind me, and then motioned for them to follow. The squad members scaled the wall one after another, each displaying an unexpectedly calm and orderly demeanor. Even Leo, the youngest of us all, only shuddered slightly when an adult held him to help him scale the wall. Once the first group had all safely crossed the perimeter wall, I reported to the command center over the walkie-talkie. The first group is all out. We are starting to advance along the planned route. The second group can get ready. Jerry's voice came through the walkie-talkie. Copy that. Stay safe, and keep in touch. Just like that, we embarked on this journey filled with the unknown. The city streets, in the torrential rain, felt exceptionally unfamiliar and dangerous. The water was already ankle-deep, and every step was accompanied by a loud splash. But fortunately, the storm drowned out these slight noises. We advanced rapidly along our pre-planned route, keeping as close to the buildings as possible, making use of every potential cover. Every time we reached a corner or an open area, we would send someone to scout first, confirming it was safe before moving forward. The first 2 kilometers of the journey went relatively smoothly, and we encountered only a few scattered, infected individuals, all of whom we successfully avoided. But as we approached the car accident blockaded area that we had discovered earlier, the situation began to get complicated. Are we still taking that small trail Leo led us through last time? A young man in the squad asked. I nodded. Yes, that trail is more hidden, and it's already been confirmed to be relatively safe. When we reached the entrance of the trail, we found that the situation had changed. The continuous downpour had turned the small path into a muddy stream, making it virtually impassable. What was even worse, the surrounding low-lying areas were severely flooded, forming small pools of standing water. We can't take this path anymore. I quickly judged. We need to find another way to bypass it. This sudden change disrupted our plans. The original route had been carefully scouted, with every danger point and shelter pre-marked. Having to detour on the fly now meant we would face more unknown risks. We could try over there, Leo suggested in a low voice, pointing at a row of storefronts. Cutting through those shops can lead to another street. The ground is higher over there, so it shouldn't be flooded. I carefully observed the direction he was pointing, then checked the map. This was indeed a viable alternative route. Although it would increase our travel time by about half an hour, it was far safer than risking a crossing through the flooded area. Good idea. I patted Leo on the shoulder, then told the squad. We'll go that way. Stay alert, and pay attention to the situation inside the shops. Just as we were preparing to turn, the walkie-talkie suddenly crackled to life. It was the leader of the second group. Emergency. We've been spotted. A massive horde of infected has gathered at the southwest corner and is closing in, requesting immediate reinforcements. My heart sank. The second group was responsible for transporting supplies and escorting the vulnerable groups. If they were overrun, the consequences would be unthinkable. What's your exact location? I responded swiftly. About 200 meters outside the southwest wall, near that abandoned gas station. We tried to detour, but the infected seemed to be systematically surrounding us. I looked at our position, then checked the map. If we move at full speed, it would take us about 15 minutes to reach their location, but that meant abandoning our planned route and cutting straight through several potentially dangerous areas. What about the third group? I asked. Can you get in touch with them? Only sporadically. The other side answered. They seem to have run into trouble as well. The exit at the northeast corner is blocked, and they are currently looking for a breakthrough. The situation was far worse than anticipated. The 3 evacuation groups had run into crises almost simultaneously. This couldn't possibly be a coincidence. The behavior patterns of the infected demonstrated an unprecedented level of coordination, as if they could anticipate our plans. I had to make a choice. Either proceed forward along our planned route, or head back to reinforce the second group. Everyone. I turned to the squad members. The plan has changed. The second group has run into trouble and needs help. But our primary mission is to clear the path and ensure the route to the West Mountain area is secure. I propose we split into 2 teams. One team will proceed forward to scout the path and wait at the designated milestone. The other team will come with me to reinforce the second group. Raise your hand if you volunteer to stay. After a brief discussion, we decided that 3 young men and Leo would continue forward to explore the secure route, while I led the remaining squad members back to reinforce the second group. Uncle, I want to go with you, Leo said, tugging at my sleeve. I know that path. I can help you guys. I knelt down and looked straight into his eyes. Leo, you've already helped us a lot, but right now, I need you to proceed forward with them, because you are the most familiar with that trail. This is a critical mission, and only you can complete it. Do you understand? Leo hesitated for a moment, then nodded solemnly. I understand. I'll lead them safely to the mount. Before parting ways, I gave the remaining squad members detailed instructions on the route and things to watch out for, ensuring they could advance safely. Then, I led the reinforcement team and moved rapidly toward the second group's location. The rain was falling heavier and heavier, and the streets had already turned into small rivers. We were forced to cautiously advance through the waist-deep water, while staying vigilant against dangers that might be lurking beneath. Over the walkie-talkie, we maintained sporadic contact with the second group, getting their latest location and status. The situation was not optimistic. They were already surrounded by about 30 infected individuals, barely holding their ground on the second floor of a commercial building, and some people among them were already injured. When we were about 100 meters away from our target, we suddenly heard several gunshots from ahead, followed immediately by the panicked screams of the crowd. They are starting to attack. The panicked voice of the second group leader came through the walkie-talkie. We won't hold out much longer. We accelerated our pace. But at a corner, the sight before us caused us to stop in our tracks. About 20 infected individuals were wandering around the commercial building, and a few of them were even trying to crawl up into the windows on the second floor. Muzzle flashes sparked from time to time from the building, but their ammunition was clearly limited, and every single shot had to be a precision shot. We need a plan, I told the squad members. A frontal assault is too dangerous. We need to distract them. I quickly scanned the surroundings, looking for resources we could utilize. Not far away sat an abandoned truck, its bed piled high with construction materials. Next to it was an electronics store that had been looted clean, with a few damaged televisions and speakers still sitting in the display window. A plan formed in my mind. You two. I pointed to 2 physically strong squad members. Go to that truck and find something that can make a lot of noise. You. I turned to the retired security guard. Check that electronics store to see if you can find any equipment that works. The rest of you, ready your weapons. Once the action begins, we need to clear the obstacles swiftly and effectively. Everyone understood their assigned tasks and swung into action immediately. A few minutes later, we assembled a few usable tools, several metal sheets, a megaphone that barely worked, and some rudimentary weapons. Here is the plan, I explained. We'll make noise in the opposite direction of that building to draw the attention of the infected. While they are distracted, you two, I pointed to the 2 physically strongest squad members, will be responsible for clearing the path to the building. The rest of you will provide cover to ensure the evacuation route remains secure, checking everyone's readiness. I gave a final reminder. Remember, speed and precision are critical. Once the action begins, do not stop or hesitate. Are you ready? Everyone nodded, our faces etched with determination and tension, but no one backed down. This was true human nature in the apocalypse. When facing a virtually impossible challenge, humanity could still unite to fight for survival. At the word of command, the 2 squad members immediately activated our noise-making device. Metal sheets were struck violently into the megaphone, emitting a sharp, screeching sound. This sudden noise, echoing through the rainy night, felt exceptionally jarring, instantly drawing the attention of most of the infected. They turned toward the sound and began to move slowly but firmly toward it. The exact moment they were distracted, our assault team swung into swift action, clearing the path to the building. The few remaining infected individuals were dealt with quickly and silently. In less than 2 minutes, we created a breakout opportunity for the second group. Now, I shouted into the walkie-talkie, we've cleared the path on the east side. Hurry up and evacuate. The building's doors quickly opened, and the members of the second group began to exit in an orderly manner. A few among them were injured, supported by their companions, alongside some elderly folk and children. Their faces were etched with terror, yet they still maintained their composure. Just as the evacuation was nearing completion, the rain suddenly intensified, turning into a veritable cloudburst. In this extreme weather, The effectiveness of our noise-making device began to wane. The infected seemed to sense something, turning back toward the evacuating group. "Move," I shouted, while signaling several armed members to step up and hold them off. We successfully covered most of the people for a safe evacuation, but as the number of infected increased, the situation grew more and more critical. Especially when we tried to evacuate the last batch, a few elderly people and an injured young girl. The infected had already broken through our defensive line, rushing straight toward them. In a split second, make or break moment, I made an impulsive but necessary decision. Draw the attention of the infected to create a window for the final evacuees. "Everyone, retreat immediately," I shouted to the squad members, then grabbed a metal sheet and began striking it violently, moving in the opposite direction of the evacuation. This strategy worked. Most of the infected were drawn by the sudden noise, turning to pursue me instead. This gave the evacuation group a few precious minutes, enough for them to safely escape the danger zone. But now, I had plunged myself into a perilous position, surrounded by at least 10 infected individuals, and my retreat cut off. I quickly scrambled onto the roof of an abandoned truck, temporarily putting myself out of their reach. But this was merely delaying the inevitable. Just as I was racking my brain for a way to escape, the roar of an engine echoed from a distance, growing closer and closer. I looked toward the source of the sound, and saw an armored vehicle driving over at high speed. The vehicle was equipped with a powerful searchlight, illuminating the entire street. "The military," I murmured to myself in disbelief. Could it be that rescue had finally arrived? The armored vehicle plowed into the horde of infected without slowing down, ramming them aside or crushing them beneath its wheels. Then, the doors opened, and several heavily armed soldiers leapt out, beginning to efficiently clear the remaining threats. "Civilians, over here," I shouted from the top of the truck, waving my arms. A soldier quickly noticed me and ran over. "Are you a survivor from around here? Are there any others?" "Yes, we are evacuating," I replied quickly. "Over 300 people split into 3 groups are heading toward the West Mountain area." The soldier nodded, reported the situation over his radio, and then motioned for me to follow him. "Get in the vehicle quickly. It's not safe here. We will assist in your evacuation." I hesitated for a moment. "No. I have to go back and find my squad. They need me." The soldier glanced at me, seemingly evaluating my determination, and then handed me a military pistol and a few magazines. "Use it carefully. Only fire when absolutely necessary. We will search along your evacuation route and provide as much support as possible." I took the weapon gratefully, and then asked him for more information, the military's status, the current state of the city, and potential safe zones. He briefly answered a few questions, but noted that most information was classified. "I can only tell you that the situation is more complicated than it looks," he finally said. "The virus is constantly evolving, and the behavioral patterns of the infected are becoming increasingly organized. If possible, leave the city as soon as you can and head for sparsely populated areas." I nodded, keeping this information in mind, and then parted ways with them. They continued their urban search and rescue mission, while I went to search for my squad. The rain had finally let up a bit, and visibility improved, making the search slightly easier. Over the walkie-talkie, I successfully contacted the remaining members of the second group. They had safely evacuated, and were moving toward the West Mountain area according to the planned route. "What's the casualty status?" I asked. "To minor injuries and 1 severe injury, but stable for now. Everyone safely escaped the encirclement. Continue advancing as planned. I'll go find the rest of the first group, and then meet up with you." The most difficult part was finding Leo and the other 3 squad members who had proceeded forward. They should have already covered a significant distance along the original route. In such severe weather and dangerous environment, it was hard to pinpoint their exact location. I decided to advance along the originally planned route, hoping to find them at one of the predetermined rendezvous points. It was a race against time. The weather was worsening, the night was growing deeper, and the activity of the infected seemed to be increasing as well. After nearly 2 hours of searching, I finally found them at an abandoned gas station. Leo and the 3 squad members were hiding in the station's small convenience store, anxiously waiting for the others to arrive. Upon seeing me, Leo ran over excitedly. "Uncle Lee, I knew you would come look for us. I promised I'd take care of you. Remember?" I smiled and hugged him, then asked the other squad members for an update. They reported that they had encountered danger a few times along the way, but managed to successfully avoid it all. Right now, they were waiting for more people to arrive, ready to continue forward. I briefly summarized and explained what had happened. The second group being ambushed, our rescue operation, and the sudden appearance of the military. This information left the squad members both shocked and relieved. "The military really came?" a young man asked in surprise. "Does that mean the city is being reclaimed? The situation might not be that simple." I answered cautiously, "But at least it shows that organized rescue efforts are still underway. Our plan remains unchanged. Continue to the forestry station in the West Mountain area. It should be safer there." After resting for about half an hour, we continued forward. Over the walkie-talkie, we learned that the third group had also successfully broken through the blockaded exit at the northeast corner. The second and third groups had successfully merged and were moving toward the West Mountain area along an alternative route. The plan was to reach the designated rendezvous point before sunrise and then head to the forestry station together. The next few hours were a continuous challenge. Although the heavy rain had subsided, the resulting standing water and mud made marching exceptionally difficult. Several times we were forced to alter our route to bypass flooded areas. Every single detour increased the risk of encountering the infected, but fortunately, the darkness and the rain became our allies, providing cover for our movements. At 4 o'clock in the morning, we finally reached the designated rendezvous point, an abandoned school. The ground here was elevated, unaffected by the flooding, and relatively easy to defend. On the school's sports field, survivors from the second and third groups were resting inside temporary tents. Seeing us arrive safely, many people flashed relieved smiles. After doing a head count, during this grueling evacuation, we had lost a total of 7 people. 3 were attacked by the infected during the breakout. 2, unfortunately, passed away on the road due to severe injuries, and 2 people got separated in the chaos, their whereabouts unknown. Considering the scale and difficulty of the evacuation, this casualty figure was already a miracle. Over 300 people, in a city surrounded by the infected, successfully evacuating, with the vast majority arriving safely at their destination, was in itself a testament to human solidarity and resilience. At 6 o'clock in the morning, a faint light broke on the horizon. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gloomy. I climbed onto the school roof, staring out into the distance. The city's skyline loomed in the morning light. Black smoke was still rising from a few places, but overall it looked a lot calmer than before. Was it that the military's operation had paid off? Or had the infection spread to an uncontrollable extent? I had no way of knowing. Perhaps it was a combination of both. Leo climbed up and stood beside me. Uncle Lee, did we succeed? I put my arm around his shoulder. Yes, we succeeded in the first step, but there is still a long road ahead of us. Will it be safer on the mountain? I thought about it and answered honestly, I hope so, but no matter what, we will face it together. He nodded, seemingly very satisfied with this answer. For a child growing up in the apocalypse, there is no absolute safety, only relative protection and dependable companions. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the fully rested column began to march toward the West Mountain Forestry Station. This journey would take about 5 hours, primarily along mountain trails, though the physical toll was heavy. The risk of encountering the infected was relatively low. Along the way, from time to time, we could see traces of military activity, helicopters patrolling the sky, and an occasional armored convoy driving on the highway in the distance. These signs gave everyone a sliver of hope, hinting that the outside world might be restoring order. Around noon, we finally saw the outline of the forestry station. It was nestled halfway up the mountain, surrounded by dense woods, looking secure and peaceful. What was even more delightful was that there seemed to be signs of human activity inside the station, cooking smoke rising from the chimney, and the fencing completely intact. That's the signal fire, someone suddenly shouted, pointing toward a high ground near the forestry station. Sure enough, a bright red flame was burning over there. This was the safety signal he had previously agreed upon. This meant our reconnaissance squad had successfully reached the forestry station and confirmed its safety. A cheer erupted from the column. After this long and dangerous journey, we finally saw true hope. The final leg of the journey practically turned into a joyful march. People walked with a light step, the sound of conversation rising and falling, and some even began to hum songs. Even those who were exhausted and injured had long-absent smiles surface on their faces. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we finally arrived at the forestry station. Welcoming us were Ryan and several other members of the evacuation team. They looked tired, but were in high spirits. You're finally here. Ryan tightly grasped my hand. We've been waiting for you. How is the situation? I asked urgently. Better than expected. Ryan led us inside the forestry station. There's enough space here to accommodate everyone. The water supply is plentiful, and the surrounding forest provides a natural barrier. Most importantly, there are virtually no signs of infected activity nearby. The forestry station was larger than I had imagined. It consisted of a main station building, several warehouses, and some small dormitories. Surrounding it was a patch of open ground, making it easy to observe any potential threats. A well inside the station provided a clean water source, and several large storage rooms still preserved some food and tools. We've already started setting up basic defensive structures. Ryan pointed to the newly constructed fencing and watchtowers. We've also planned out farming and livestock areas. If managed properly, this place can become a relatively self-sufficient little community. Over the next few days, we were busy settling into our new home. Everyone was assigned tasks and quarters, starting to work based on their respective skills and experience. Those with farming experience were responsible for planning the planting zones. Those who knew construction began reinforcing and expanding the dwellings, and the medical personnel set up a rudimentary clinic to look after the injured and sick. As the coordinator of the community, I was busy every day resolving various issues and mediating disputes. Despite the harsh conditions, the majority of the people demonstrated an astonishing level of adaptability and team spirit. Under the shared goal of survival, former strangers quickly formed a tight-knit community. Leo was placed in the children's group, along with the other kids, receiving basic education and survival skills training. He quickly became a little leader among the children, often leading everyone to explore the secure areas around the forestry station, searching for usable resources. A week later, we received our first official message from the outside world. A military patrol arrived at the forestry station, bringing the latest updates on City S. Most parts of the city had been occupied by the infected, but the military was establishing several large safe zones to centrally house survivors. They logged our location and numbers, promising to regularly dispatch personnel to provide necessary supplies and information, so we haven't been forgotten. Mrs. Zhou said with relief. The outside world is still there. Yes, Dr. Chong nodded. Though returning to normal might take a very long time. Until then, we must learn to be self-sufficient. Gradually, the forestry station turned into a true home. We grew vegetables and grains, raised some wild pheasants and wild rabbits, caught from the mountains, and even established a small library to collect and preserve knowledge. Every month, the military supply truck would arrive right on time, bringing medicine, tools, and news from the outside. What was most heartening was that our community was constantly expanding. More and more survivors discovered this sanctuary, joining us with their respective skills and stories. Every new member injected fresh vitality and hope into the community. Early one morning 3 months later, I woke up early as usual and stood at the highest point of the forestry station, looking out into the distance. The sky was exceptionally clear, and the distant city presented a kind of bizarre beauty in the morning sun, even though I knew it was still crawling with hidden perils. But for some reason, a sense of peaceful hope welled up in my heart. What are you thinking about? Ryan's voice came from behind me. Thinking about how far we've come, I answer. From waterfront estates, that trapped community, to this growing new home we have now. Ryan nodded. Yeah, we lost a lot, but we also gained a new beginning. We stood in silence for a moment, enjoying this hard-won moment of tranquility. Then, Ryan pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. Forgot to tell you, this was in the supplies brought by the military yesterday. I unfolded the note. On it were a few simple lines of text. The North District safe point has stabilized. A major breakthrough has been made in virus research. The first batch of serum trials was successful. Hope is on the horizon. After reading it, I took a deep breath, feeling an indescribable wave of emotion surge in my chest. Hope, a word so precious in the apocalypse, became concrete and real for the first time. Do you think it'll work? Ryan asked. The serum, I'm not sure. I answered honestly. But it at least proves that humanity is still fighting, still looking for solutions. And I paused for a moment. Even if the serum can't solve every problem, we've already proven that we can survive in this new world. Right at that moment, Leo ran up the hillside, a look of excitement on his face. Uncle Lee, come quick and look. Our first harvest of potatoes is ready. We followed him down the hillside, arriving at the farmland in the center of the community. There, several volunteers were digging up potatoes, surrounded by a cheering crowd. Though these potatoes weren't large, they bore a healthy sheen under the sunlight. They were the fruit of our collective labor, and the symbol of a new life. Watching this scene play out, I thought back to the words I had written in my log a month ago. In this world, survival is more than just breathing and a heartbeat. It's about finding a reason worth fighting to maintain. For us, that reason is each other. This community made up of strangers, who bound together tightly in adversity. No matter how difficult the road ahead may be, as long as we maintain this connection, we will never truly lose hope. I knelt down, cupping a potato that was still caked in dirt, feeling its temperature and weight. This simplest, most resilient crop could still grow in the harshest environments, providing nourishment and hope. Unyielding and steadfast just like humanity, never giving up. Uncle Lee, why are you smiling? Leo asked inquisitively. Because I was thinking. I gently ruffled his hair. That in a way, we are a lot like these potatoes. No matter how harsh the conditions are, as long as there is soil, sunlight, and water, we can take root, sprout, and start anew. Leo nodded as if he half understood, then cheerfully ran off to help with the harvest. Standing at the edge of the field, watching this busy and vibrant little community, a serene comfort filled my heart. The apocalypse changed everything, yet it failed to change what is most essential: human adaptability, creativity, and the desire for life. In this new world, we are redefining what is normal, what is home, and what is hope. And this, perhaps, is a true rebirth.